Raiders.
SciAnts Stream, but we ain't bugging. We over here bubbling. You be chugging what we got. Now the tribes arrive. I promise that I haven't prescribed you vibes. The vibes we got are giant. Shout out to the stream for the raid. That's science.
Welcome to Heaven Center. We're going to begin on a really fascinating series of papers on, again, elephant biology and the fundamentals of elephants. There's actually a fair bit of stuff that we don't fully understand about the elephants and how elephants are able to do what they do. And actually, this is probably going to be, in all honesty, a multi-part stream, because I thought that it would be more worthwhile to focus a little bit more on the cancer element, because that's really where the genetics of things are that are interesting. But we're going to dive deeper. We're going to dive deeper into just their overall behavior as well. So, I will start off. We're going to pull up. Who yeeted? Thank you, Smikes, for the yeet. Alright, we're going to pull up.
Gucci.
Gucci indeed. Gucci in the Hoochie Mama, as Jern says. By the way, folks, if you're not checking out the lovely Jimmy B93, also go check out the amazing and breathtaking Jimmy B93. Love you, Jimmy. Jimmy had his two-year celebration stream, or streamiversary, this past week, and that was an absolute hoot as always, Jimmy. It was always a good time there. Poachers have force of elephants have smaller no tusks. Not true, Melanol. Not true. They might be going towards there, but there's not a full evolution on that front yet. It's moving maybe, but there's not any real genetic evidence at that point yet. So speaking of genetics, folks, this is the first study that we're going to talk about today, and it's going to be the big kicker for today's stream is how on and what is this connection, right? Andrew asks, say hi. Please, Debs, please tell Andrew back to saying hi as well. Figure out for his affiliate anniversary next month. Music Girl, you know the moment we have the details, we're going to do all the fancy pants things for Mr. Jimmy B. I hope it'll be another 38-hour stream. I think it only makes sense, Music Girl. It only makes sense. So, chat. First of all, welcome on in. We haven't had a SciAnts Saturday for some time now because of the little one. We decided to have a SciAnts Saturday this week, primarily because we were off a few days during the week, and we were trying to not be off that many days. So that's why we're having a Saturday today. And I thought an elephant biology would be a nice kind of stream also for Earth Day, because when I think of the plant, like Earth and like big animals that are like representative of the planet, elephants tend to be first ones that come to mind. So I thought, why not, let's focus a little bit on elephant biology today. There's literally no time we could do this 24-hour stream. Music Girl, listen, Saturday to Sunday, or Jimmy calls in sick from school one day. All the things are possible. All the things are possible, Music Girl. Immoral sea creature, not today, Water. Not today. Today, focusing specifically on elephants and their amazing biology. So the big question is, and the big elephant in the room, no pun intended, is why don't elephants give cancer? So we're going to start off, before we go on to the cancer genetics front, I want to highlight a particular gene. Aren't whales cooler in this? What do you mean, Melano? I want to highlight a particular gene called P53. P53 is what we call a tumor-suppressing gene. When it is activated and correctly functioning, you will not have tumors that grow. Size, number of cells in cancer? I don't know what you mean, Melano. Guys, speaking of which, I forgot to end the prediction. The prediction was the balloon get haircutted. The correct answer is, with 23,000 channel points on the line, correct answer is a resounding no, chat. We did not get haircutted today. Cliff! Welcome on in, Cliff Alistair McLean. How you doing, Cliff Alistair McLean? Great to see you, my friend. Cliff, you already found it. The new challenge as well to premiere the new music video is also live. How you doing, Cliff? How you doing, Cliff? Good to see you. One Saturday, free in all of May, we're going to a first birthday party next. What you mean? A first birthday party? Music Girl, as in it's someone's first birthday party, or a very first birthday party that you two are going together? Because there was all these components here. More cells, higher risk of cancer. So that is actually not true. Is actually not true. So Melanol brings up a great point. So there had been this long-running hypothesis that the larger the animal, the more number of cells it has. That means more cell divisions. And that also means the higher likelihood of having cancer, right? It turns out that that's actually not necessarily the case, because so the elephant and the whale both buck that trend because they're extremely large. Their cells aren't necessarily giant, right, relative to the rest of the size of the body of the animal. Instead, there's some underlying genetics that help fight tumor cells. Folks, please go follow legendary and breathtaking Yoga Garrel as well. She's a supermodel across the country, Canada. Tetris 99 professional gamer extraordinaire and now Lego builder. Please go follow the amazing Yogurt Garrel. Hello, Travel the World. Welcome in, Travel the World. How are you doing today, Travel? We're talking about a very fascinating topic, I think. Elephants and their relationship to cancer. So again, the hypothesis is that a very large animal should be more likely to have cancer. And
curiouser and curiouser.
Because they divide many, many more times, and because there's a higher likelihood of cell division, right? Because there's so many, there's a higher likelihood that something gets mutated during a cell division. And if something gets mutated, you might be able to mutate one of the key regulators of growth. Depends on the genes and stuff, right? The principle of more, so risk is higher is correct, but the bio works more complicated. So you are absolutely correct, Water. So it is, logically, if all things being equal, if humans and elephants had a similar genetic makeup in terms of tumor protection, that would 100% be true. If we grow larger and we have more cells, I don't even just mean like weight-wise. I mean like if all of a sudden we started growing to 10 feet tall, right? There's more cell division that takes place because you have more cells, you're bigger, and the likelihood of having cancer or some kind of tumor goes up. Why don't elephants get it? Before we can explain why the heck don't elephants get it, we have to analyze the role of a particular gene. This gene is called a master regulator of cell growth. Hi, Tech. Welcome on in, Tech. Was there a correlation that found a human height and risk of cancer? No. So, Melanol, those are always highly flawed studies. The reason those are very, very flawed is because, as Water was saying earlier, there's a lot of genetic factors and environmental factors at play, especially in humans, where environmental factors make up a big reason as to why you get certain disease states. And what ends up happening is that those correlation studies tend to be from a single population, and there's also no control. There's no controls at all for what's you're being exposed to. So the likelihood that you find anything is such a poor piece of science that you can't really take it seriously. There's also no way to genetically test it. So even if there is a thin correlation, the moment you check a different population, all of a sudden it just goes away as well. So that's something to keep looking at. Celestial Bean Art is amazing. If Bean continues this kind of nasty behavior by calling yourself not amazing, all we're going to do is just continue shouting her out, because that's what we do here. That's what we do here, chat. That's what we do. I love your face, Bean. There is none of this self-loathing. Otherwise, there's going to be nerfing and more shout-outs. Are we Gucci? Are we Gucci? Are we Gucci? Celestial Bean Art.
We Gucci.
I am taking it away from short people, Melanol. It depends, for the sake of cancer.
Feckin' Gucci.
Depends a lot more on your environmental factors that you're exposed to, rather than anything in terms of height, right? What you're exposed to during early parts of life, through development, through sun exposure, right? Because UV light's a mutagen. Because anything that breaks DNA strands, or even can cause a small break, even though the DNA could be repaired, if it's not repaired perfectly, there's a mismatch, and that could be at a very important gene. And one of those important genes that causes a variety of cancers is P53. We're going to talk about P53 right now. You'll see why the elephant is actually really, really amazing when it comes to P53. But this gene is what it's called a master regulator. When it's on, it's facilitating cell growth. If you mutate its suppressors so that it's always on in a certain cell type, you will get a tumor. It can be in your colon, it could be in your brain, it could be in your bone, it could be wherever, because P53 is active in all of your cells. And mutating it in any one of those cells can create out of control cell growth, which is a tumor. This will tie back into elephants, but again, I saw this as an opportunity to talk cancer and elephants, and I could not pursue it. Just like, folks, I can't not suggest that you please follow our friend Debs. Debs is gunning for affiliate, so please go drop her that follow. She's a breathtaking legend. She last streamed her wedding. What will she stream next, chat? Go check out Debs. As a comparison between two or multiple different species, not an unrealistic comparison due to the biochemical pathways of each species. So water. Unfortunately, so the best way to present a comparison would be that we don't, right? That you just ask questions about that one particular organism. You do studies on that organism, and that's that. However, we can't do studies on humans, number one. And number two, there is high level of genetic conservation between different animals. So if you look at fruit flies, there's about a 65% genetic similarity to humans, right? Versus like a bonobo is 99.5 similarity percentage to a human. But we look very different. And so it's not necessarily due to the genes, but it's due to how the cells are being regulated, how the genes are turned on and off, and when they're turned on and off. Hello, Clement. How you doing, Clement? Welcome on in, Clement. Clement, we're talking cancer and elephants today. What do they have to do with each other? You will see, Clement. You will see. So, actually, what you will see, Water, is that the reason elephants have high levels of cancer resistance is actually due to a very similar gene that's in humans. And how they've gotten resilient is something that we could 100% go on that front. You're making more of a high probability of comparison. So, I'll explain this way, Water. If you're doing research on fruit flies, there are ways to model human diseases in the flies. For example, what you can do is you can insert genes that cause like Alzheimer's in a fruit fly. And it's the same ones that you insert like that are present in humans. And it'll actually give the same result as a fruit fly. So that's the level of conservation. So Water, you don't have to have the exact same genome for a mutant gene to have the same effect. And that's more of the comparison that we're looking at. And then the other thing too, Water, if we were comparing to elephants, let's say, and this comparison to elephants and disease resistance came down to a gene that we don't have. It's not actually the case, but let's just hypothesize that that is the case. What if you were able to then introduce that gene into human cells and make them resistant to tumors? And then you could have some kind of cancer treatment that's a gene therapy. So what I'm trying to get at is we don't have to be identical to the organism that we're studying for there to be value in studying that organism for human health. Does that make sense, Water? And Clement, no worries at all. Clement, we're not going to be delving into... It's primarily, we're going to be focusing on elephants today and why they are resistant to cancer. What is their genetic basis of tumor resistance, and why an elephant is actually holds a possible key to a tumor and cancer treatment. And I thought, Clement, it was a very strange topic, but one that is founded in deep in science, and I thought that was very, very cool about it. Guys, it's Bubbles in the chat. Make sure to follow our amazing friend, It's Bubbles, gamer streamer extraordinaire. Love your face, Bubbles. Love your face. I hope you have a good family day. Talking about the complications that can come up later down the line. Most of all is speaking my mind, but I hope it's not. No, please. No. Water. There's no sorry for asking questions. Please ask questions, because listen, the whole point of this stream is for us to have conversations about science and get folks excited about science, and if that's something that we can do by you asking questions, then please continue asking questions. Complications that come up later down the line. So it just depends, Water, to be totally honest. Like, when we start off doing research on a fruit fly, you can do Risto Rock, Risto, welcome the heck in. How you doing, Risto? Risto, thank you so much for the resub, tier 2 for 15 months. How you doing, Risto? How was the rest of your stream? Sir, you were vibing very well this morning. I was very much enjoying the stream today. It was a very rockin' atmosphere this morning with the dancing and the singing and the songwriting and then the gaming. It was lovely, Risto. I very much appreciate it. Clement, I appreciate the lurk. Appreciate the lurk, Clement. Love your face. Love your face, Clement. It's certainly hopeful discussion. Anything that might be cosmetic. Yes, that's what my thought is too, RPG fan, is that and it's RPG, it's weird to me. So Risto, we're talking about a connection between cancer resistance and elephants. And how studying elephants can possibly provide treatments in cancer, which is wild. But so that's one of the things that we were going to do a deep dive into elephant biology, and I think I just rabbit holed. I have a bunch of stuff that we're going to talk about, just like general elephant biology, that will continue probably on Thursday. But I thought, why not? This is so cool from a biomedical perspective that let's delve into it a little bit. I saw Rista, I was lurking. I saw the first crown, and then I saw you get a couple more. I'm like, what is happening today? Rista's crushing it on that Fall Guys. Got folks, if you're not checking out our friend Rista Rock, not only is he a gamer mental health chatterer, but he's also working on a beautiful calendar to benefit the orphanage near his place. Please go check him out and go pre-order the calendar as well. All right, so what are we looking at now? 13 from 700. Chad, go follow Rista Rock. He's 13 followers away from 300 followers, or 700 followers. He's it's getting close, y'all. It's getting close. Please go follow our friend Rista Rock. We're a smidge away. Yeah, Risto. That's why I thought, sir. I knew. You question it, Risto. I love your face, sir. So, chat, why are we talking about a gene called P53? It is a master regulator in cell growth and tumor genesis. When it is mutated, it will yield cancer. The majority of, I know cancer is a blanket term because it describes, in general, uncontrolled cell growth. That is cancer, right? And so even in a dish, if you mutate P53, you will get uncontrolled cell growth. Let's learn a little bit more about it.
Every day, we are bombarded by environmental agents that damage our cells. Things like UV radiation and chemical exposure such as air pollution and cigarette smoke. Even the byproducts of metabolism such as...
This is also why it's hard to do those correlation studies that Melanol was talking about, of looking at how height compares to cancer output. You cannot account for things that people undergo in terms of environmental factors. Sometimes cigarette smoke, eating, there's a bunch of different things that can do that will yield it. Literally had to buy a hat at the last night at the racetrack we went to avoid the sun. And Music Girl, there is a really... I love Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman is a big advocate for sunscreen and skincare. He actually got skin cancer on his nose, and he's been like a very big advocate for wearing like hats and sunscreen. And it's you know, I don't know. It's Wolverine. Hey, Neuralicia, how you doing, Neuralicia? She didn't want the sun to hurt her face. Jimmy, do not let the sun hurt Music Girl's face, or Music Girl might hurt your face, Jimmy B. Chad, also go check out our friend Neuralicia. There's science communicator extraordinaire. Neuroscience in particular. Go check out the lovely and amazing Neuralicia. Love you, Neuralicia. Love you, Neuralicia. Sun protection is premier importance. Yes, it is. I've been tanning a little bit lately, and Lita's a little upset because I haven't been using sunscreen. But Evil Petty Mike, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the colony. How are you doing today? My mother has had skin cancer and breast cancer, so be very careful about spending time in the sun. An RPG fan, Lita. Everyone in Lita's family has gotten skin cancer, so that is why she is very, very careful on her always wearing sunscreen, but also, like, that's why she asked me to make sure I'm wearing sunscreen, to make sure, like, we're paying attention and whatnot. Get out there for a little bit. Thank you, Risto. Enjoy the laundry, Risto. Risto, when you do the laundry, make sure you throw underwear in the air. Just throwing that out there. SBO 50 daily. You're very wise, Neuralicia. Very wise. My boyfriend's sister's in the pharmaceutical industry, and she doesn't believe in sunscreen. It's crazy. Rain, first-time chatter. Welcome the heck in. And, it's hard to, like, my sister was just visiting, and she is doing her rotations right now in medical school, and she was telling me, she's like, oh, I was doing an oncology rotation, and it's just wild to me that the nurses, like, smoke, you know, and like, or the attending smoke, or there was another, she mentioned she was doing a neuro rotation, and the attending rode a motorcycle without a helmet. Right, and it's just like, you know very well what's going to happen. It's just the choices that people make, and you can't control people like that. But it's definitely a interesting thing to be thinking about. Hello, Tolkien Tao. Welcome in, Tolkien Tao. How you doing? I can just be more careful, monitor for signs, and more action needs to be taken. Yep, preventative measures are always the best thing, RPG fan. But it can be uncomfortable to check. It can be uncomfortable to pay attention, but you should 100% continue on. For the folks coming on in, again, we're talking about the connection between of why elephants are very cancer resistant, and they tend just to not get cancer across their lives, even though they're very large and they're very long-lived. Because common logic would dictate a large animal that has a whole bunch of cells that need to divide, all those divisions would lead to increased likelihood of mutation, number one. And number two, the long life would also lead to an increased likelihood of mutation. All those things added together. But for some reason, they don't get cancer. And why is that? Younger and younger people are getting colon cancer. People aren't sure why. Recommending earlier screening now. There has been some evidence to suggest that it's the metabolomics. So when you're metabolizing things, your breakdown products tend to be could potentially free radicals, and free radicals can insert into the DNA and cause mutational effects. So, and that ties into what Neuralicia said, which is also the gut microbiome. But the big thing I've seen is there's a huge evidence mounting for metabolism as being a large culprit of it. My kidney cancer was akin to cancer mostly in people in their 80s. Yeah, in RPG there's a whole genetic slurry that connects it to it as well. Evil Petty Mike, first time chatter. Wear sunscreen and drink plenty of clean water. I look 15 years younger than my peers. It pays off. Chat. Evil Petty Mike is not evil at all, but very good person, and very, very good advice as well. Welcome the heck in, by the way. So again, it's all a lot of cancers, a huge, absurd number of cancers come down to this gene P53. And what is its connection to elephants? We will delve into that. Let's continue a little bit more on what P53 is, and it does.
Free radicals can damage cells. These damaging agents...
And this is actually connecting back to what Smikes' question was, and we were just chatting about. Metabolism yields free radicals, damaging DNA. That DNA damage means the gene is mutated. Not every mutation is going to matter. There's a lot of mutations where You mutate an base pair, and it creates the exact same amino acid, and that's called a synonymous mutation. You replace a DNA building block with something different, but it produces the same thing. So it is a synonymous mutation, doesn't cause any effect. The dangerous ones are non-synonymous, where you mutate a particular base pair or you remove a base pair, and it changes the amino acid code, changes the protein in a way that it might work, but it might not be functional, and that could yield a lot of negative effects.
Can make changes to the DNA in our cells. DNA encodes the information needed to make proteins, which are the building blocks of our body. To keep 2 meters of DNA organised within the nucleus, it is wound around special structures called histones, much like thread on a spool. Damage to DNA can include single-strand breaks, double-strand breaks, changes to the DNA code, DNA kinks, and DNA sticking together.
Basically, there's a lot of ways that you can introduce mutation, and a lot of those ways are environmentally mediated too. If your DNA sounds like that, there's definitely something wrong. I think so, Cliffhouser McLean. It sounds almost like a little like crunchy paper almost. You want it to not be so noisy. Is that why keeping a decent amount of antioxidants is important, protects from the free radicals? Yes and no, Evil Petty Mike. So there are actually studies where fruit flies are given high dose of a free radical producing food, and that free radical producing food kills them very rapidly because it causes uncontrolled mutagenesis of their genome and they die. If you can protect them from it by feeding essentially a cocktail of antioxidants. There was one study in the journal called Experimental Gerontology where they did this study and they fed the flies a compound called superfruit. And superfruit was a cocktail of things that prevented free radical formation with antioxidants, and they showed that the fruit fly's lifespan was rescued, meaning that they lived as long of a lifespan as if they were not eating the thing that caused the free radicals to form. Where it got weird, Evil Petty Mike, and didn't make much sense is, okay, if that happens, you might predict that if you gave a regular fruit fly this superfruit's antioxidant, right, maybe a regular fruit fly having a regular diet should live longer as well. But instead of living longer, it didn't have any effect on its lifespan. So it seems like it is important in certain scenarios, which is, it seems like that's the case for most everything in science, right? Free radicals is in compounds that can cause radical reactions or compounds that could create a free radical in a compound. So water, a free no, you're no sorries, water, we're gonna get you to stop saying sorry. So a free radical is usually a molecule that has a free electron. So for example, a common one that is formed during metabolomic breakdown is called superoxide dismutase. And that causes an O2, so 2 oxygens and a minus on the strand. So that is a negative charge. And because DNA also has various charges, right? DNA has both negative and positive charge in it. The free radical will latch onto part of the DNA and it causes a breakpoint in there. A compound that is a free radical one that can create one. I guess both. Usually if you were to just be eating, you can't just straight up eat free radicals because they're not safe, but rather they will bind to other things, but rather you will eat things that when broken down cause the release of free radicals. Yeah. How does oxidative stress play into this? Someone brought that up in my stream very recently. I have very shallow knowledge on this. So oxidative stress, Neuralicia, will just again yield mutations, and that can connect to disease states. It doesn't have to be exclusively cancer. It can be it can lead to cell death. It can, like, apoptosis, so that's programmed cell death. Usually doesn't lead to necrosis, which is the uncontrolled cell death, like the blackening tissue. but there is a big part of it in the aging field, Neuralicia, that's been studied. So aging, usually your cells will stop the divide as you build up free radical damage over time, which is in part due to oxidative stress, which is all that means is the release of free radicals. Again, through maybe eating certain foods, or maybe exposure to certain light, and so on and so forth. So that will lead to these damaging effects in your body. Now, there are some cells in your body, for example, neurons, that no longer divide. That's why if you get a spinal cord injury, you can't walk again, because those neurons right now, without scientific intervention, don't redivide and reconnect. They also age, though. So even though your neurons are still in here from when you were a kid, they're accumulating cellular damage as well. And so that long-term cellular damage can build up over time. Hello, Daniel Streams. Welcome in. Ways to prevent cellular damage from that is very limited, because we don't fully understand the crosstalk from what we identify in other mammalian models or in fruit flies, and how that connects to what we find in humans. So, like, if you took a bunch of antioxidants, that may or may not help, because the body has a way of filtering out things that are in too high of dose. So, like, if you eat a bunch of vitamin C, you tend to just pee out the excess. Even, like, y'all know about the Emergent C that you can take. It's that powder that you put into water. Hi, Killer Koala. Killer Koala, that kiss is very unsettling, my friend. It's very, very unsettling. But thank you for the kisses. Guys, if you want your very own kisses, and you like lovely art, go check out our friend Killer Koala. There is vitamin C poisoning. So as Smikes points out, there are doses that when you get extremely high, that will be toxic to you, but you gotta go fast. Everything at a certain dose is in fact toxic. So even something beneficial like vitamin C, if you go up too high, that is also a very toxic thing. Skip, I didn't know you left, Skip. I didn't know you left. Where are my glasses? They are downstairs. I took my sister to the airport today, and if I'm driving, I wear my contacts. And so I didn't bother switching them back. So it's not that I can't see the chat. It's that my contacts are in today. If you talk about energy that can create radicals in cells, is one of the first protections for energy not the sun, and its energy. So elephants have thick skin and all. So, water. Your skin cells are actually a line of defense against pathogens, but not the sun. And you might be like, that doesn't make any sense. But the reason for that is skin cells divide very rapidly. They have a high level of turnover on your body. And that high level of turnover means a lot of cell divisions, which then means you're more likely to be, if you mutate something, they're going to proliferate, and you're going to be more likely to have skin cancer. That's why skin cancer is such a common form of cancer, because of how your skin works. It's not dependent on thickness. It's a fundamental feature of skin cells that they divide rapidly and a lot. And that makes them more susceptible to mutation. Because if you're dividing all the time, there's more opportunity for you to get a mutation. And because of that, you're more likely to get cancer. Skin cells defend are enough to defend against alpha waves, right? Dead skin layer at all. So they can defend against some waves, but not against UV, which is highly mutagenic. That's why there's the importance of wearing sunscreen. Yeah. So there are other waves can also mutagize. Again, it's also dose dependent. So like how much you're exposed to will matter. Same thing with like UV. It's just with UV, you're more likely to take in the amount that can cause a significant amount of damage. So that's some of the features there for it. But great
It has been estimated that an individual cell can suffer up to 1 million DNA changes per day.
So just think about that too. If it's green, Evil Petty Mac says, I feel like they're gonna take out the cancers like with just their little crabs and smoosh their foot. Evil Petty Mike, you're very, very correct. Evil Petty Mike. correct. I mean, Mothman is fine. I know he's very handsome, the Carrot. I know he's very handsome. You told me this, the Carrot. I know. Garrett, I know. You don't. You brag about your significant other here, telling us how fine they are. Daniel Streams, thank you for the lurk. He's okay? No. We're gonna nerf that comment. Don't you dare. Don't you dare just call him okay. He's breathtaking. Right, chat? Right, chat. Very good. Very good. All right. So, Raiders, again, why this is important and why this is cool to talk about is elephants are huge. They live a long time. Because they're big, you would predict that their cells are dividing constantly. And constant cell division leads to what? Higher likelihood of mutation, which can lead to cancer. Because you can mutate genes, for example, like P53, and a mutation in the P53 gene will lead to uncontrolled cell growth and tumors. And elephants don't get cancer. So why is that? Before we get to that answer, we're talking about the gene that is P53.
Most of the time, our cells do a very good job of dealing with DNA damage. A special sentinel protein called P53 is recruited rapidly in response to DNA damage.
P53 repairs that broken DNA and repairs it more than likely correctly.
P53 slides along the DNA until it finds a critical site.
By the way, these molecules, while they don't make these kinds of sizes, these were determined by crystal structures. Crystal structures are a methodology to get the 3D structure and appearance of these proteins. And so these reconstructions are based on those crystal structures. This isn't just some rando who went loosey-goosey and thought that it would look cool like this. It looks more likely does look like this in within the cell.
It then binds to this site. P53 then sends the message to halt cell division until DNA is repaired, or if damage is too severe, the cell...
This is critical, right? So it stops the cell from dividing, because if there is a mutation, if the cell divides, then it's going to spread the mutation to other cells in the body, whether it be human or any other animal. So it puts everything on pause and says, okay, hey, let's fix what's here before spreading it to other cells. If it can't fix it, the cell undergoes programmed cell death and it kills the cell. So it's this mechanism is constantly protecting us from not just mutations that could yield cancer, but in general mutations. Guys, speaking of cool things, I am wearing my Moko Made t-shirt. Guys, go check out our friends Derek and Devin of Moko Made. Look at this beautiful logo that I got here. Look at that. It's lovely. Lovely. Love you, Derek and Devin. All right. Continue on, John.
Cell is destroyed. P53 is therefore known as the guardian of the genome.
And yeah, that's, I think, always an interesting term. The genome, it's called the guardian of the genome because of what they do, which is quite, I think, lovely and amazing. The Dylans, the Dylons. Look, Mothman 92, there's 5 greatest rappers of our generation are Dylon, 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 and Dylon. If anyone recognized that deep cut, you'll get some hype. That is from an amazing TV show back in the early 2000s.
But what happens if these defense mechanisms themselves are damaged? A tiny change in P53, shown here in bright blue, results in a protein that is unable to securely bind to DNA.
So that little mutation prevents it from binding to the DNA, that prevents it from telling the cell to stop dividing. Then the cell divides, and it'll keep spreading the mutation. Thank you for the lurk, Bob. Then we also have some electron microscope images of DNA that show the structure. Yes, so there are... So the very famous, like, Rosalind Franklin images, Cliff, right, have that X loop shape. There are now ones, Cliff, scanning transmission electron microscope images where it slices through the cell. You can get resolution of seeing Not necessarily like this quality, but you can see the mass of DNA. You can see the looping of the DNA structure. You can see where it's tighter and more open. So there's a lot of different features of it you can see. And then, Cliff, there is this additional kind of microscopy called, blanking on the name. Basically what they do, Cliff, is they flash freeze it and drop it from a surface, and that yields a particularly strong cut site, and it just allows you to zoom in much further. So it's a particular version of scanning electron microscopy and transmission electron microscopy that's primarily used in neuronal signaling and neuron structure, but that also allows you to see more features of genetic elements like DNA. These things, though, Cliff, like particular binding sites, this is much more of a high-C experiments, meaning high-C, not just a beverage in science, but it is a way to visualize the 3D structure of the genome. It tells you what's connected to where and how it's connected. It's a really cool methodology and probably very underestimated. Hello, Andrew CZ! I love your handsome be-contacted face. What is be contacted? Guys, if you're not checking out Andrew CZ, one of the most handsome people ever.
Don't you like me a little bit?
Ew, I don't even like you
And
a
Big
little
Gamey?
bit.
I heard you like me a little bit.
Well, maybe just a little bit.
Big Gamey and Andrew CZ coming on here. How y'all doing today? Andrew, I got my glasses off because I took Dory to the airport. Zen! Hello, Zen. How you doing, Zen? Hi, Grimly, you sneaking in here too. I saw you sneak in here earlier with saying welcome, Raiders, Grimly. Grimly, how you doing today? I took my little sister to the airport, and I prefer driving with my contacts instead of glasses. Coffee Rocks! Hello, Coffee Rocks! How you doing, Coffee Rocks? And so that's why I I don't have the glasses in, because I like to drive without glasses and instead just use the contacts. And I usually take them out earlier, but I just haven't yet, so that's kind of the gig there. Big Gamey Andrew, I hope y'all are doing well today, guys. Go check out Andrew. We'll also get the Big Gamey Lovely Fans Band shout out as well. Maddie Holmes is in the house. Chat! Haven't seen Maddie Holmes in ages. Hi, Maddie Holmes. How you doing, Maddie? Maddie Holmes is accusing me of streaming when I was talking to her last Friday, or was it last Tuesday? Yeah, when it was last Tuesday, Maddie's like, "You're streaming right now," and I'm like, "Am I though? Am I though?" And Matt's like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "I don't know about that." And we were totally streaming chat, but it was very silly. It was very silly, folks. It was very, very silly. Zen, how are you doing today? Maddie, I know Maddie sometime. Maddie Holmes, I love your face, Maddie Holmes. Guys, make sure to go follow Maddie Holmes and sing the Maddie Holmes song that goes, Maddie Holmes, yo, Maddie Holmes, yo, Maddie Holmes, yo, Maddie Holmes, yo, Maddie Holmes, yo. Perfect thing to do when you're brushing your teeth. I'm not doing, I'm thriving. Zen, that's a positive, right? I only ask, Zen, because sometimes you never know. You never know, Zen. Very positive. Good. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. High C stuff looks very confusing. If I understand, let me show you, Cliff. Hold on.
You don't understand. You don't understand. If you understood, you wouldn't understand.
Alrighty. Maybe. Alright. This figure might be a good starting point. Guys, also go check out the lovely and amazing Bit Gamey, folks. Extremely handsome, extremely kind, the world's greatest father. Like, if there was any, but there's no better father on the planet than Bit Gamey. Game developer extraordinaire working on a new game called Dog's Life. I'm a dog.
Science, know you. You're the cutest to know that you deserve it. Juno,
There's
you
new
a
title
star
for it.
over here. I reverse the card like Uno.
Yes, you're breathtaking, Big Gamey. Hi, TD Fox. Welcome in. Bought a new pinboard from an estate sale today so I can spread my merch out more. Homeward Hound. Yes, Homeward Hound. That's what. Thank you, Big Gamey. I'm like, I remember it was very clever. Can't remember the title yet. Bit, that sounds like it was fun. It sounds like actually a pretty good day. Again, I was primarily doing airporting stuff and then hanging out with the wee lassie and whatnot. Typing is hard. Typing is harf, even, Big Gamey. for the chat coming on in, we are talking about the connection between cancer and elephants, why elephants are cancer resistant and resilient. In particular, the big reason why we're chatting about that is because elephants are giant and long-lived. That is usually a recipe for cancer. If you're big, that means you have a lot of cells, and it means they're constantly dividing. And then you'd hypothesize, okay, if I'm having a lot of cells that are constantly dividing, there's a higher likelihood there's going to be a mutation that yields something that creates cancer. And it happens in us, right? As we age, skin cancer is very common because they're the most highly dividing cells in your body. But then all of a sudden there's other, all the elephants are fine. And we're trying to get to why that is, talk about the genetic basis of that. We're just chatting about a method called Hi-C. Hi-C looks at the structure of the entire genome within a cell. And the way it does that is, let's say if you have all these strands of DNA in your cells, like all your 24 pairs of chromosomes, let's say that their 2 chromosomes are interacting. Also, bigger, taller people at the time, that is disproven, Maddie. That's been shown to be an effect of the meta-analysis on the populations that were being done on, rather than an actual connection. So it seems like there's a lot of environmental factors that are not accounted for in those studies, and they tend not to replicate. So I put a big eyebrow raise on those. I'm sure there's something there, but there's data showing, like, even available right now in bioRxiv, that shows like the opposite direction of it. Hello, Optic Nerve. How you doing, Optic Nerve? So this is what Cliff was asking about. So if there's 2 strands of DNA that are interacting with each other, so for example, this black strand and the red strand, you can fuse them together with the red circle. And the red circle is a fixative agent. Causes, again, the strands to be permanently bound to one another. And then you run an experiment that's essentially a sequencing-based experiment and figure out what 2 strands of DNA are connected and touching each other inside the cell. And so it's looking for 3D structure of the genome and what it all looks like. And so those are some of the things that will also allow you to ask how they're bonded together. You can also do this, Cliff, for transcriptomes. So the transcriptome is what here, Cliff, actually. Let me draw it for you, Cliff Alistair McLean. So it's a very similar approach to this. It's, again, using that, like, red circle to fuse things together. So it's a technique called an MNASE seq. Seq, S-E-Q-E, means sequencing. So, Cliff, if this is your DNA, and you want to ask, like, where P53 is located, so what you can...
Together, we can rule the galaxy.
Addict! Twitch Addict, thank you for the resub! Twitch Addict! Happy sub-anniversary, Twitch Addict. Twitch Addict, love your face. Welcome the heck in. Lord, dinner for some friends. You are amazing, Andrew. Have a great dinner. Have a great dinner, good sir. And please know that you're breathtaking. Just right there. I watched Hugshell in Kellowa. She did well. Doing very well. Thanks for being oh, thank you, TD Fox. Took it as a size and age issue. Yeah, Maddie, there's a lot of factors at play. For sure. So, Cliff, if you wanted to see where in the cell P53 is acting. So P53 here is our master regulator. It repairs broken and damaged strands of DNA. If it's bonding right here within the cell, what you can do, Cliff, is you can put in that red circle, which is a fixative agent. So we could do, it's like formaldehyde or methanol or ethanol fixation. Just depends on the protocol that you're doing. And then you put in a compound called MNASE. So MN ACE. And the word ACE in any of these enzymes usually refers to something that gets broken down. So proteinase, ACE, there is DNase, there is RNase, right? There's lots of ACEs. These proteinase breaks down protein. DNase breaks down DNA. RNase breaks down RNA. MNase is the one where it makes no sense whatsoever. It doesn't actually have a clue into the word of what it breaks down, but you can predict that it's breaking down something. And what it's breaking down is strands of DNA that are unbound, Cliff. Hi, Tort von Schlott, which begins with an E and ends with an M. Ermiger! Hi, Tort von Schlott. How you doing, Tort von Schlott? Weird to think that Pokemon Pikachu is older than me. I remember mapping the human of the genome. I remember the biology professor going, OMG, they mapped the human genome. We're all like, shh, I caught a Clefairy priorities, sir. I mean, listen, Clefairy catching is very important. So is the human genome. Endoplasmic reticulum. Thank you, Tort von Schlott. Tort! Thank you, Tort. Tort, you are very... Tort, you know what you are, Tort? You are...
Gucci.
You're very Gucci, Tort. I'm doing alright, Tort. The little one, is starting to sleep better and is just being awesome, Tort. She's an absolute cutie patootie and makes me very, very happy. Even though sometimes she does this. Not necessarily with eggs, but like she'll spit on me or something. But at the end of the day, makes me very happy. Amazing. Don't go crazy now, Tort. Don't go crazy now. Love your face, Tort. So, Cliff, what MNase will do, if you put it into the cell, it'll bind the DNA and just start chopping it. And just start chopping it up and up and up and up until it hits this fixative agent. And it stops. So everything else, though, on the DNA strand, because right now I'm drawing it, there's nothing else really bound to it, gets eaten up. Now, Cliff, what if that there are other things bound? I'm just giving a secondary example here. Let's say that there is this purple molecule bound, and so that also gets protected. And Cliff, let's say that you don't care about the purple one, you just care about the green. Tort! Thank you for going fast, Tort. What you can do, Cliff, is you can select this region with an antibody, and that is what you'll pull out of your sample. So if your sample is full of the green and the red circles that are bound to the DNA, you can select for the one that you're actually interested in via an antibody. It's called an antibody pull down. It removes whatever the antibody binds to, and you design the antibody to be bound to this green circle. And then your final tube will essentially just be full of this DNA right here. You can remove away the extra stuff, like you can remove away the antibody and the bound ligand, and you can remove away the red strand, so you're just left with that orange. And then what you'll do is you'll sequence all the DNA that's in here. And the way you do that is pretty straightforward. If here are your strands, you separate them out. Actually, let's go ahead and erase them. You separate them out to be single-stranded. You then add on an adapter. An adapter is a known genetic sequence. Gonna head out again? No worries. No worries. Sleep well, Tort von Schlott. I know, Zen, I have the window open because we don't have the AC on yet because it's getting warmer, Zen, but it feels good with the window open. And so it's being a little bit silly. It's being a little bit silly, you know. So you put on the adapter. That allows for a second one to bind, and then you can copy this section of DNA, and then you just do it over and over and over again until you have a lot of copies, and then you can figure out every site in the genome where this P53 is bound. Because, Cliff, this antibody won't just pick this particular section in the genome, it'll pick anywhere that the P53 is bound. So you'll get a whole genome-wide look at every binding site there is, and that's how you can figure out where p53 interacts normally, where is a site of heavy mutation. That's actually because Cliff, there's different regions of the genome that tend to be more open, and those regions tend to be more susceptible to mutation. And one correlation is, if you do this kind of analysis, you'll see p53 a lot in those open regions of DNA, because again, they're more likely to be mutagenic. Does that make sense, Cliff Alistair McLean? There's a lot of airplanes that fly over, chat. Of airplanes. Awesome. Yes. Glad to do it, Cliff. Cliff, the methodology is actually really, really cool, and it's something that, you know, at some point we can consider just doing a deep dive on, because methods can be really stale, especially if we're just trying to talk about like these scientific methods like ChIP-seq, RNA sequencing, proteomics, the pull-down sequencing that we just did. But if you put them into an interesting context, it's a fun way to do that. The PS3 have to like go to the elephant's DNA with tweezers and pluck it out. Wait, to get to the P53, I have to go to the elephant's DNA with tweezers and pluck it out. Just gonna fly over. So, Evil, you have P53. You have P53. It's in humans. There's a high likelihood of there being a P53 mutation. Let me finish this, and I'll give you the kicker. So this is in your cells, Evil.
This means that no decisions can be made about whether to repair DNA or destroy the cell. Without functional P53, over time, cells can accumulate more and more DNA damage.
So, if you mutate the P53, it's not going to stop the cells are not going to be protected anymore. You can get more mutations, and the likelihood of mutating something that causes cancer is going to happen.
These damaged cells are more likely to grow and divide out of control, leading to formation of tumours. P53 alterations are present in more than half of all human cancers, collectively making them the most common event in the development of cancer.
So it's interesting, the most common event in development of cancer is mutation that P53. Evil, I mean, my cells have little goth medieval chandeliers on them, but similar enough. Evil, I think they're going for like a generic appearance versus just like not the most specialized look to it. But yeah, you're 100% right, Evil. 100% right. So chat, how does this connect to elephants? So the kicker is elephants also have P53, but they have 60 copies of P53 in their genome. So if you mutate one copy of P53, it doesn't matter, because then nothing is going to happen, because they have 59 other copies of P53 that'll protect them from getting a tumor. And if you mutate 10 on what the genetic basis is for cancer resistance and protection in elephants, that is the gene P53. P53 is a master regulator of cell division and cell growth in most organisms studied in labs. If you mutate P53 in humans, more than likely you're going to be getting cancer. P53 prevents cell division because when it detects mutation in a cell, like on one of your DNA strands, and it halts cell division until it's repaired. If it can't be repaired, it kills the cell. So that's how we get protected against cancer. It's called a tumor suppressor gene. However, if you get a mutation in it, it can yield cancerous effects. In particular, you do have two copies. By two copies, I mean you have one on the maternal chromosome and you have one on the paternal chromosome. So one copy from dad, one copy from mom. That does not mean that both copies are functional. A lot of humans are heterozygous. What that means is there's one normal copy and one mutant copy. And because there's a normal and a mutant copy, that still means you just have one. So you'll see some smokers that live long lives that don't ever get cancer. Most likely when they were born, they had 2 wild type or normal copies of P53, and through the course of smoking, they mutated one of those copies, but the other one hasn't been hit yet. Eventually, that will also be mutated. But a lot of us exist in a heterozygote state. Again, 1 normal copy and 1 of the mutant copies. The world we live in, with the AI about to rise and turbocharge, think I'm optimistic we'll really make huge breakthroughs when it comes to cancer aging. I hope so, Evil Petty Mike. It seems like the word mutants often used in science is always mean the same thing. So, Bit Gamey, in my field, whenever I say mutant, it means a particular gene has been mutated to be different from what we've determined as the wild type gene. Wild type genes, Bit Gamey, are not universal in definition. For example, in fruit flies, there is the red-eye gene. And the wild type phenotype, or how it manifests in an organism, is that the fly has red eyes. The gene itself is called white, because when you mutate the gene, it will cause a mutant fly to form that has white eyes. And so that's your comparison. It no longer has red eyes, it has white eyes, and therefore it is a mutant. From what we've agreed upon is the normal, quote-unquote, wild-type gene. What the sequence of that gene is, Bit Gamey, might be different between different red-eyed individuals. Because there could be mutations in the actual genetic sequence that don't yield differences in appearance. That is called a synonymous mutation. So, Bit Gamey, for that, if we're looking at our genome, let's grab that color. And here is, all right, I'll just do a single strand. Do it like this. So here are your base pairs connecting, right? And so you have A, T, C, G, A, T, C, G, blah, 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 right? And when that DNA is read, it becomes RNA. Again, that just means you're just looking at single A, C, A, T, whatever that genetic sequence, the nucleotides are. And what you can do is, some cases, Bit Gamey, you can mutate them. So instead of being a C, this might turn into a G. And that might yield the exact same protein. So from this step, from the RNA, you go to protein. And it's always read in groups of 3s. So it's a group of 3 is like this, makes an amino acid. Another group of 3 makes amino acid number 2, and so on and so forth. There are mutations, Bit Gamey, and variances in the amino acids where those 3 codes will yield the exact same amino acid. So even if I replace one of those letters with a different one, it'll be the exact same amino acid. However, that's called a synonymous mutation. If you make a non-synonymous mutation, that means that amino acid is now different, which might mean that the protein is not created. Because if you have, what you can do, Bit Gamey, is that the sequence of UAG means stop. And so if you have a UAG at the very beginning, that of the sequence of those 3 amino acids, that means the protein won't even form. Or it'll form a protein with a misfolded region and it can't do its job correctly. And that's a non-synonymous mutation. So is anything genetically modified considered a mutant? Yes. So, but Bit Gamey, the term genetically modified also is dependent on what you want to call it. Because, for example, corn, the difference in corn that you can eat versus the maize style corn that you cannot eat is 3 mutations yielded that. Same thing with bananas. There are bananas with seeds fully in them, and it's 2 mutations to make the bananas that you eat today. And those were genetically modified by humans because we were selecting for certain traits, right? We were selecting for bananas that had less seeds, and eventually yield, and like now we have the modern banana. If you compare it to its original ancestor, it's a mutant, but would you consider it one? Right? Hard to know. It's hard to know what you would consider it as. So I think it's more, that tends to be more of a personal definition. I haven't seen anything really standardized in the literature on that front. It just depends on who you talk to. Usually, though, a bit gamey for genetic.
Together, we can rule the galaxy.
Crystal, thank you for the resub. Crystal, how are you doing today? Welcome the heck in. We're chatting about the connection between elephants and cancer resistance. Welcome the heck in, Crystal. How you doing today? It's great to see you. So, bit gamey. If we insert a gene into a fruit fly, or an ant, even an insect, it is under the definition of the USDA a genetically modified organism. And the reason I can tell you this is because the reason we have to have a bunch of lab safety settings is that these animals don't get out. Because even if they get out and we've made them less likely to survive, it's still introducing genetic variants in the population that was made by us. And so under the USDA definition, those are defined as genetically modified organisms that you don't want to get out. Does that make sense, Big Gamey? So it's a convoluted definition of what exactly genetically modified means. It seems to be on a very case-by-case basis. And then same thing with like the term mutant. The term mutant, in my mind, is a change in the sequence that yields a change in the physical attribute of the organism that you're studying. So if you can modify tomatoes to be big, right? They weren't always that big. That's us selectively breeding for that. And so if you compare it, that might be a mutation. And therefore you're eating a mutant tomato. But there shouldn't be a negative connotation with the word mutant or with genetically modified either. Because if you're genetically modifying a fruit or a food, there's nothing bad that's going to happen to you from eating it. That's a unfortunate misnomer. How's the day going for you and your beautiful family? So, Crystal, I took my sister took her to the airport. We hung out. She came in on Wednesday. We hung out for a couple of days. She's now on her way to a medical conference in Boston. Presumably she's already landed, but she has not texted me. So I will need to send her a text. I will do that right now to make sure she's landed safely, because I don't want her to be, not safe. I know, Big Game. She's dancing on that. Look at the sky, the bird is playing notes from Copperman! Hello, Copperman. Welcome to Hacking. Overcast, super windy near Boston, rain about 7 p.m. too. She did make it safely. She did. I took her. We were at the airport before 9 this morning, so she made it all safely. Which I was glad to hear about. I'm glad that she was able to visit. I wish she would have stayed longer, but she had a conference there, and she flies back to Atlanta on Tuesday and then goes back into Florida the next day. Crystal, I drove to the airport, and when I drive, I wear my contacts, and I just haven't taken them out yet. Gabor, man, we're talking about mutation and cancer resistance in elephants today. That is the topic of discussion. So again, what we were chatting about was P53. P53 is that regulator of cell growth. When mutated, it cannot detect and is unable to detect mutation within the genome. And therefore, when cells start dividing, it can't stop cells from dividing with its mutations. So cells start accumulating more and more mutations, and that can yield to uncontrolled cell growth or cancer. Why don't elephants get mutations? Well, they have 60 copies of P53. And all those copies
now
prevent it from getting cancer. Now, this is a lovely PBS special. This is an older video, but we're going to kind of delve into it as well. Pacific sound frequencies. No, P53 is a gene, Crystal. It's a gene. It's a gene. Welcome the heck in.
Big hopes in the fight against cancer and the potential for some surprising allies, elephants. Special correspondent Jackie Judd reports on researchers thinking outside the box.
The Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey performing packages!
Oh, Smikes, because I drove to the airport today. Gotcha, Smikes. Genetics, not environmental. Yep, yeah. So Crystal, the mutations are as a function of environmental factors, but it's the mutation of the underlying genetics. So environmental factors like sunlight and the UV rays can cause mutation in your skin. In your skin cells. Your skin cells are very susceptible because there's a lot of them and they divide a lot. And that will yield the possibility of having those mutations, and it just is constantly going. It's like Maddie says, it's a loop almost. It becomes a circular argument.
This spring, all of these circus elephants will be permanently retired, but as they leave the center ring, they're taking center stage in another unlikely place, the Huntsman Cancer Institute in Salt Lake City.
Just about every.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's no longer elephants in the Ringling Circus. I think they've retired all elephants from that kind of circus. I remember as a kid I loved seeing elephants in the circus, but as an adult it's like they are so smart, and the captivity that they had really traveling between different sites, like the elephants need a lot of space to be happy. And now I think we're learning more and more about them and realizing that even zoos that have them are expanding their areas to make sure that they're doing well, like on a mental and emotional front, which I love the fact that is now we're accounting for that. Back overseas, bad for them. My bud recorded them going to an elephant sanctuary in Malaysia. They're happy now. Being ridden gave them a lot of health problems. Oh yeah, I imagine so. I mean, there's even riding horses, if you don't pay attention to their backs and their potential strains, and you just keep jumping and riding them, right, you can ride them literally into the ground. And it's unfortunate, the health concerns were not really high on them, but at least things are moving along and getting better for these beautiful animals. And we will continue our soiree into elephant biology on Thursday of this week. Not necessarily this genetics of the cancer cells, but a little bit more just their cool generic biology. Yeah, Smikes, it doesn't surprise me. There's a lot of countries that exploit animals, unfortunately. You would think by weight differences, elephants would not be affected by the weight of humans. But I guess their spines, bit game, and the curvature of their skeletons really aren't designed, for lack of a better term, for folks riding them. And I think that's maybe why things don't work. Thank you, Cliff! Cliff, listen, I love your face. Cliff, you have a lovely rest of your day, Cliff Aston McLean. Cliff, we'll see you tomorrow, or sometime soon. Cliff, you're breathtaking, amazing, and extremely handsome, and extremely kind, truly cool, truly awesome, truly amazing. Like your name, Space Captain. Love you, Cliff Aston McLean! There's a double salute right there. Yeah.
Every person I met who heard about this would come up and ask, elephants? Cancer? What's the connection? Hi guys, how's she feeling?
The possible connection is a work in progress, led by pediatric oncologist Dr. Joshua Schiffman.
Insert the needle into the vein.
He's enlisted the support of the Ringling Brothers Center for Elephant Conservation in Florida and the Hogle Zoo in Salt Lake to draw blood from these sturdy mammals for his experiments. Logically, elephants should get cancer much more often than we do. They have 100 times the cells than humans, and therefore much more opportunity for those cells to mutate into cancer. But that's not the case. Less than 5% of elephant deaths are attributed to cancer.
And actually, this was a huge puzzle up until about 10 years ago, where they actually, when they did all the sequencing and they identified the potential candidates, it was a hypothesis that was, hey, what percentage in humans? I've seen as high as 70. Hold on. So according to a 2020 study, so I don't know about current ones, Smikes, men have a 40% chance of getting cancer. Women have a 39% of having cancer in their lifetime. The new rate of cancer is, yeah, about 445,000 per 100,000. So it's getting close to half. It's approaching half. I've seen it, but it does vary on populations, because things like diet influences it, and many more. And its mortality rate, you got it. Hold on, Smikes. So cancer is the second leading cause of death in the U.S., Smikes, with a quarter of all deaths in the U.S. due to cancer. So there you go. That's the death measurement, Smike. So a quarter of all the deaths. So it says 250,000, or sorry, 250. Hold on, where is this citation from? Hold on. So this isn't looking at, so the total death rate is, it's a quarter of all deaths. Yeah. It's a quarter of all deaths in the world. One out of every, okay, here we go. Smikes, worldwide, it's 1 out of every 6 people die of cancer. So a very high mortality rate, relatively speaking. Much better in the elephants. I do everything I can to prevent cancer. Is my number one fear. For me, Evil, it is Alzheimer's. Not that I don't fear cancer, but Alzheimer's is the thing that I'm really terrified of. Losing my mind is what really scares me. 16% versus 5%. You know, you'd think it would be more. You'd think it would be more. I do wonder, Smikes, though, how much of that percentage, though, is being affected by treatments, right? So the data that I'm looking at doesn't take into account of, if we didn't treat this patient, would they die of cancer, right? And then so would that number go up from 16%? My guess is yes, given the number of people that are going to be diagnosed with cancer over the lifetime. So that number is a little... exactly. Yeah, exactly. We're not giving we're not needing to give the elephants chemo. So that's why I think that number is a little skewed. Again, just due to treatment issues. Think we'll cure Alzheimer's in a lifetime. Tons of progress. I hope so, Evil. It's a lot of it's moving towards that front of cures. It just comes down to funding, really. Like, for example, Evil, if I would have told you that I want to study elephant cells, and I want $5 million for the next 3 years to study elephant cells, so I want an R01 funding for elephant cells, you might be like, I don't know why you want to study elephant cells, go away. But it turns out elephant cells have a high level of resilience to cancer.
Belind, Lita, use your words.
Which one's Mike? Which word? So R01 is a type of grant. Government grant that gives you that's like the largest amount that you can get. So we get that check, right? But if I tell you that I just want to study elephants for the sake of studying elephants, you might be like, well, that's not directly related to humans and I don't care. It's a very short-sighted way to look at research, because there could be something in one of these animals in the genetic front or behavioral front or some kind of small molecule drug, like if you're studying plants, that could help fight an infection or a disease, but you don't know until you look, right? So the gentleman that's studying elephants, my bet is he probably wrote a grant it was probably framed in a way where it was like, hey, I want to study elephants because they're long-lived and they're big and they don't get cancer. So he probably just used the standard argument of why we should study these, but it's one of those interesting facets where I wonder if he had just written, I just want to study elephants because they're cool, probably wouldn't have and the justification would be like conservation or something else. He probably wouldn't have gotten the funding. So it's by being not short-sighted. And folks, you can also not be short-sighted by following our friend Irish John Games. Absolute legend. Everyone chat. Go follow Jern right now.
Elephants have had 55 million years of evolution to figure out how to avoid cancer. Now, it's our turn to take a page out of nature's playbook and try to figure out how do we help our patients and families with cancer.
Most humans have 2 copies of a gene called P53. When everything is working, the protein in P53 is a cancer suppressor, repairing or killing mutant cells so they don't multiply.
And it's just as an aside, it is called a tumor suppressor gene. It is not just for genes, if mutated, that could lead to cancer. It does just repair DNA in general. My partner has an environmental gene mutation. Kodali, many of us do. You being outside in the sun, you probably have some kind of mutations in your genome that you didn't have at birth. Eating Kodali can yield mutations by metabolomics byproducts. It's just you accumulate a lot of mutations that don't have a negative effect. It's just the ones that have a negative effect, the ones that we gotta fight and beat.
Elephants have 40 copies of.
And this is actually now outdated. So the current estimate is 60 copies of P53 in both Asian elephants and African elephants. So they've done genomic comparisons between the two, and they found that it's not specific to one species of elephant, but most likely their common ancestor of modern day elephants had these genes as well. I tried to look and see if they'd done this analysis on woolly mammoths. But they haven't done it. They have not done the analysis on woolly mammoths. My guess would be that they also have an enlarged number of P53 genes. And they're not different, they're just copies. They're just multiple copies in the genome. My bet is that they'll also have that kind of same boost. But I cannot confirm as the data has not been collected.
P53.
This is our tissue culture room. This is where we actually do the experiments to try to understand how does elephant P53 work. In here are the actual cells growing.
After bombarding elephant blood with radiation, Dr. Schiffman and his team stood back and observed how the elephant P53 responded to the damaged cells. The answer, recently published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, was that the multiple genes responded far more robustly than P53's response in humans.
Instead of trying to repair themselves, the elephant cells, many of them all went on to cell death, to this cell suicide, or what we call apoptosis. It's as if these elephant cells had said, well, it's much safer, much better strategy to just kill the cell and start over. If we do that, there's no way that that cell can go on to become cancer. And
so having all the that's a great pause. Having all the regulators are more protective. Dodos too, I'd love some dodos even. How much public funding would something like this bring on? A feature on a major show or major broadcasters? So, Smikes, this is on PBS. I guess I don't know how reliably and heavily viewed they are. In terms of funding, I have nothing really to base this off of based on my experience in funding situations. Is if there's one lab working on it, they might get the funding, but if other people started working on it, it will either be less funded in that particular lab or only be like smaller kinds of funding opportunities like NSF funding, that's the National Science Foundation, instead of the NIH, which is the National Institute of Health, because it's so out there still. But I think having more funding for it would provide more opportunities for it. Because imagine if you had a tumor in you, if you could inject some kind of gene therapy that could increase your P53 copies, and then your body would naturally drive those cells to cell death. That's like a targeted version of, I guess, chemo, like a better version of chemo, because you're not killing everything else. You'd have to figure out how to, and presumably having more copies of P53 in normal cells wouldn't negatively affect you, because it'd just be protective. That's the hypothesis. You'd have to do this in cell culture and human cell culture lines. You'd have to put it into mouse models to make sure it works, depending on how you hypothesize it works, and a lot of other steps. I imagine it would need a lot of funding to get it through. The dodo back in the Destroy Us All. I mean, you never know. A better version of chemo is immunotherapy right now. There's also, one big thing that happens, Smikes, during cancer treatments is cell exhaustion. So it's, with immunotherapies, what ends up happening is almost like, Smikes, we've talked about habituation. When you go into that smoky bar and 5 minutes later you can't smell the smoke anymore because you've habituated. It turns out that immunotherapies, when you turn on the immune response to activate and fight against the cancer, what you get is, they're called the CAR T cells, CAR-T. Those are the T cells that fight the tumors. You actually get a yield of something called CAR T cell exhaustion, and they actually just stop recognizing that threat because they're just depleted of resources and the body can't keep up. And so now there's research going into how you can correct CAR T cell exhaustion. Those are still tend to be relatively new data. There's only the fundamental classification and characterization of how this works at a molecular level is really, the big first paper came out last year. So it's still in its infancy of what is it and how to correct it. But yeah, so it's not so much the cancer gets used to them, it's that the cells, for lack of a better term, they just tire. And so you gotta rejuvenate them and get them revamped to get them going again. That's what they're trying to study now. It's, again, still better than poisoning the whole body. So I guess this kind of therapy would be more analogous to that. Get the nanobots, send them in to eat the tumor. Evo Petty, there are research going into how a nanobot could work. It's right now, it's the same question as the immunotherapies too, and this kind of therapy is the specificity of how to direct them towards a particular site, because tumors will have cellular markers on the outside that could allow them to be recognized, but other cells in the body might also carry those marks, and so it's making sure maybe there's a particular density of those marks that you make sure to get them at. But then that's also a fine balance, because there could be cells in the tumor population that also have less, simply because they haven't been mutated far enough along, and so you want to make sure you get all the mutagens out, and so it snowballs so rapidly. Easier to get through the blood-brain barrier with him. Yeah, so the blood-brain barrier is a huge challenge to get rid of, for brain cancer, right? Because the blood-brain barrier is meant to protect you against bacteria and viral infections, but it also means we can't get treatment in. So it's always a double-edged sword source of protection.
That was an aha moment for us in the lab. We're trying to learn how to get kids better with cancer without making them sick.
Now the research has turned to this question. How does elephant P53 respond in human cancer cells? And could it stop the disease cold? Could it be a treatment to prevent cancer or halt its growth?
In here are 3 breast cancers from different individuals.
So these dishes, just so y'all know, is a common setting. So you can immortalize. So cancer cells are immortal. They'll continue dividing and dividing and dividing forever as long as you give them new nutrients every couple of days. You can also freeze them at negative 150 degrees Celsius, like in liquid nitrogen, and that puts them in a period of stasis. And then you can bring them back by just thawing them, and you put them in a dish with some food, and then they come back to life. That's not just cancer cells, primary cell culture. There's a lot of things that you can do in the lab. And so you can have a whole stock of the same kind of cancer cell stored away in your freezer. You can keep doing experiments with the same kinds of cancer cells, and Another thing to point out, these cells are usually a homogeneous population. Thank you for the lurk, Bit Gamey! Bug squishing, not real bugs. Oh, game bug. Gotcha, Big Gamey. So these cell dishes are usually the same type of cell versus in real tumors, it's a combination, a heterogeneous population of cells. That's what's actually... Crystal, my goodness, thank you for the 1,000 biddies, Crystal. Thank you so much. Kevin appreciates the treasure. Thank you so much, Crystal. Appreciate the heck out of you. So normal cancer populations are a mix of different cells and different mutations. These dishes are homogeneous, so single type of populations, because it is easier as a baseline to work with. So then you know what the cell's responding to. Eventually you move up in complexity as well. Water content destroy the nucleus when freezing and unfreezing. So you make a glycerol stock solution, Mike. So you put it in some glycerol. That prevents the expanding and contracting. So you wouldn't get cells popping. Instead, it's a protective, like, sugar solution essentially in there. It allows you to unfreeze the cells and they come right back. Interestingly enough, you can put nematodes in there too, and you can freeze them and they come right back to life years later. It's kind of crazy. I have something in common with those cells, touche world cells. So those in cancer cells, their DNA is broken and damaged. There's a lot of break and damage. They're molded back evil, so they're pulled back together to make another strand, but when they're repaired, you have an increased likelihood of there being a mutation. So their genomes are built in a way that make them more resilient to mutation. Because normally in our normal cells, if you have mutation, the cells die. But in those cancer cells, there's that pathway that would kill the cells is off, so they're not going to die at all. They're just going to continue dividing and growing. Why can't we cryofreeze humans with that? So Smikes, interestingly enough, you can't even cryofreeze a bug with that. It seems to have to do with how rapidly that glycerin. So if you inject yourself with glycerin, you can't get it out, and it'll actually solidify your body. And so you'd have to, like, if it's not inside of you as a preservative, it would be essentially form as a cellular preservative. You can't get it back out. And so if I just submerged you in it and put you in, the idea is everything doesn't freeze fast enough, and the glycerin's not surrounding your internal organs, so those would freeze and then pop upon bringing you back. If you covered you with everything of it, it's toxic, because you're not gonna, like, you can't dilute it away and when we bring you back. So those are some of the features of the glycerin that allow you to not work on a whole organism. It's weird that it works on nematodes. There is one study, Smikes, that suggested at one point that you could do it on fruit fly eggs, but I haven't heard of anyone else doing that. So even on fruit fly eggs, it seems like it's a hardship.
That have been growing in the labs.
Talking about elephant biology, and what about elephant biology allows these cells in an elephant to be more cancer resistant than in humans. And it turns out, Crystal, my goodness, Crystal, thank you so much for the tier 1 gifts. It's Ishara. Thank you so much, Crystal, for that tier 1 gifts up. Ishara, enjoy the ad-free viewing and the emotes made with love. Crystal, thank you for your kindness. Thank you so much, Crystal. So we hypothesize it'd be more likely for these animals to get tumors and cancer because they're bigger, they have more cells, and they're more likely to undergo mutation that could yield a cancer. However, it turns out that's not the case. And one reason is because of the number of P53 genes. They are a tumor suppressor gene. It prevents mutations from building up and cells to divide with high levels of mutational rates. And so that's what we're chatting about today. Again, everybody, welcome on in. Them being larger, their cells are not larger, Crystal. So their cells are roughly the same size as ours. There's actually a mathematical mass of how big a cell can be, because given the size of the cell, like how much space it can have and how it can move things around, because there's information coming in from the outside of the cell and has to reach the nucleus. And there is just a mathematical distance of how it can move in between a space. And so you're limited at a certain size. That's not to say that some like really tiny organisms, they'll have really tiny cells, and you can go up in size. But if we look at the size difference between elephants and humans, you're not going to be seeing a large difference between the two. Which is kind of... And I think it's kind of cool to see those differences. Yeah. I posted in your Discord what I put to go start. Oh, thank you. And Smikes has already got me the link. Thank you, Smikes. Oh my goodness. Alright, let's continue our video on elephants and cancer resistance.
We put it into the breast cancer cell lines and we wait and we see.
So they put in the P53 elephant copies, the elephant P53 into the cells, the cancer cells of like breast cancer cells, right? And so then it's asking the question of, well, what's going to happen with that front?
Will the elephant P53 kill these breast cancer cell lines?
Lily, you get some spoons. Emma, I'll get you the bowls.
The research and where it may lead would be especially meaningful for people like Tony Means. He and others with a genetic disorder called Lee-Fraumeni syndrome have only one P53 gene instead of two, leaving them virtually defenseless against cancer.
In your family, your mother had Lee-Fraumeni, died very young.
Yes, ma'am.
You have aunts and uncles who have cancer and have Lee-Fraumeni?
Yes. A good chunk of our family. I would say a majority.
And they've all been tested. They have
every single one has been Lee-Fraumeni.
Means is being treated for cancer, and 6-year-old daughter Emma is being watched by Dr. Schiffman because of a small brain tumor. 2 other children with Lee-Fraumeni are frequently screened, and the family takes part in Dr. Schiffman's research in any way they can.
I kind of put hope in him by choosing to have children, knowing that there's a chance they could have the gene. Constantly.
But you understand this is years off.
Oh yeah,
if ever.
Yeah.
If ever.
Oh yeah. Who knows?
So this would be our nanoparticle.
And that is where Avi Schroeder comes in. Dr. Schroeder of Technion, the Israel Institute of Technology, joined the research several months ago with the goal of developing a drug for humans that would mimic the elephant's robust P53.
So now you're looking at 2 different avenues of research, right? One is trying to put in the elephant genes to the human cells to kill the tumor cells, and this is the other side of it, of you creating a drug to do the exact same thing as what the elephant P53 is doing. So they're trying multiple avenues to simulate what we see in the elephant, because it makes more sense to diversify versus putting all the eggs in one basket.
Now there's a delivery issue. How can we get that protein to the disease site, into the cancer cells, to act and to perform the therapeutic activity on site? We're gonna wrap the proteins inside a nanoparticle, and they'll release the protein inside the cancer cells.
So this is what Eva was talking about, the nanoparticles, right? Of like making sure they can cross the correct barrier. It's just getting them into the correct cells so they will activate and actually start destroying those cells. And again, the nice thing about this, it would target ideally only the diseased cells, so you wouldn't be like chemo where you're killing everything. It wouldn't be like the immunotherapy where you'd run out of the immunotherapy cells, or the exhaustion of the cells. You'd have a much more targeted approach, and in theory you'd be able to target this approach for many different kinds of patients as well, and they're different kinds of cancers.
And if everything works, the cancer cell would be killed.
In theory, right, Smikes, if it could target the correct cells.
Yes, the cancer cell will go into a death cycle after that, yes.
We are very excited to have Dr. Schroeder here.
The team of optimists believes clinical trials could begin in 3 years. Not surprisingly, there is skepticism in the medical community, and that is shared by Dr. Lee Hellman, the head of clinical research at the National Cancer Institute.
No, I understand, Smikes. That's what I understood, yeah. It was, because some treatments make you sick on top of you already being sick. Yep.
Institute.
The whole idea of putting a elephant gene that's regulated in a unique way into a human being when we've had enough trouble putting human genes into human beings with all kinds of difficulty. I would say he's got a lot of hurdles to overcome.
But Dr. Hellman does believe there is value to this deeper investigation into P53.
I think his finding only lends further evidence to support that hypothesis that P53 function and understanding it and being able to regulate it would be a major step forward in our ability to treat cancer.
Cancer touches almost every family, directly or indirectly. For families like the Means, it is a certainty. So what is happening in this lab?
Hi, Giga. We're gonna finish this video, then I'll give you the ferret, okay?
At the zoo could be life-changing.
Have you taken the kids to the zoo to see the elephants?
Yes. Oh man, that was awesome. The kids loved it. And it was kind of fun for me to sit there as a father and just look at them. If this is the answer in their lifetime, that's all I want, is for my kids to have that. And this gives them hope.
I don't promise my patients it will happen because I don't want to have them disappointed. But if I didn't believe this would work, I wouldn't be trying it.
Dr. Schiffman concedes that turning to elephants for a cancer treatment is outside the box. But that, he says, is often where the best answers are found. This is Jackie Judd for the PBS NewsHour in Salt Lake City.
Pretty remarkable, right? We're going to continue on that front, but again, it all comes back to P53 and how it's differentially regulated in different animals. And having those elephants have the additional copies makes them more protective against cancer. So Giga, we're talking about the connection between cancer resistance and elephants and how that could happen and benefit humans. And it all comes down to a particular genetic number. So P53, the gene, is much more, there's 60 copies in an elephant versus only 2 copies in a person. And if those get mutated in your cells, you're more likely to get cancer. But the elephant has all this P53 in there, and they're just much better at killing off any cells that could become cancerous. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And also, we're going to tie it and connect it to a blue whale in a little bit as well, because it's similar processes are governed in blue whales and other large organisms that tend not to get cancer. But Gigalinks, how are you doing today? Welcome on. And folks, Gigalinks has chosen, we had a question in chat from Grimley about how old the article and the videos are. So Grimley, there's been updated data released. This study came out in 2015. There's been updated data that came out about 2 years ago, which is still looking at. So it is not yet moved past or into clinical trials. So there's a lot of mouse models. Come on in. Again, we're talking about elephants and cancer, and the whole reason this is interesting, at least to me, is that these animals are massive, right? Giant animals such as elephants and blue whales tend not to get cancer, even though the common knowledge will tell you they should be getting diseases. The reason is they're large, they have a ton of cells in their bodies. Usually those two combinations mean that they're fast dividing, and that fast cell division is more likely to be cancerous. And so that is the fascinating and backwards biology of what happens with these animals. And we're trying to figure out why that is, and if we can use what we learn about from cancer resilience in elephants and larger animals, maybe we can use those in humans. And chat, pinned to the top of chat, is the Towards Night music video called Green Love about catnip and oregano. Make sure to check it out. Watch it a couple of times. Make sure to get those Towards Night numbers up. And again, chat, go follow our amazing friend of Towards Night, a.k.a. TN, a.k.a. the most handsome man in the United States, a.k.a. ice cream maker extraordinaire, a.k.a. Crunchwrap Supreme creator, a.k.a. an amazing musician and freestyle rapper. I am proud to call him my friend. Go check out Professor Knight. And Towards Night, I see you changed your profile picture, sir. So I see that change in the profile picture, Towards Night. All right, let's continue a little bit more. This is a more recent video with a little bit of new data. I gotta go. Been a fun one. Have a good rest of your stream. Thank you so much, Neuralicia. Ma'am, love your face. Have a great one, chat. Again, if you're not checking out Neuralicia, science communicator extraordinaire, a neuroscientist, streams on Mondays and Fridays currently. Go check out Neuralicia as well. Love you, Neuralicia. I have to change it again now, feeling it. It was a late night decision. What are you changing towards Knight? Professor Knight, what are you changing, Professor Knight? The gardening? Don't worry about it, towards. Listen, gardening. Oh, the profile pic. Gotcha. Well, the gardening too, towards Knight, for the song. It's, you know, it's okay. Gardening connects with a lot of people, so having the song about gardening, I feel, will connect with a lot of people. So I would go ahead and stick with the gardening theme, but you're right. You have the picture. If you want to change it, that's also okay. You don't want to change it, that's also cool too. It's just different, and it surprised me when I first saw it today. Not in a bad way, sir. So, a little bit different.
With cancer, the main thing to worry about is something going awry when a cell copies itself. So you would expect bigger animals with more cells and longer lives to get cancer more often.
And see, we've been saying this since the start of the stream. It makes sense, all things being equal. If we are genetically on the same playing field, then that is why we suspect larger animals will be getting cancer. But we are not, that's not what we're seeing. So there must be other genetic factors at play that are preventing cancer formation in an animal that we should expect to be getting cancer. And so figuring out what the genetic basis of that is may help us one day. At least, even if we don't utilize it in the therapy directly, understanding what are factors that prevent that. Oxidative says, hi Jeezy, welcome in. No, it turns out in elephants, so oxidative stress can lead to mutations, Jeezy, especially particular genes called P53. That is a gatekeeper of cell growth and cell division. If P53 detects that there's a lot of DNA damage in your cells, it will shut down the cell during the cell division state and kill the cell. However, if P53 is mutated, then there's nothing to prevent that. So then you start having cells that have a lot of mutations dividing and dividing and dividing, and those could have cancer. An elephant has P53, just like humans do, except it has 60 copies of P53. And they are really, really dang good at snuffing out cancer cells and potential mutations that could be yielding to cancer. And so utilizing that methodology would be very, very amazing to bring in and somehow incorporate into human treatments. By the way, welcome in, Jeezy.
But the weird thing is, they don't. This biological puzzle is called Peto's paradox, and researchers are working on solving it. Like, we've learned that bigger, longer-lived animals have evolved better ways of dealing with cells that start to grow out of control. But we don't really know how they do it, except for elephants. A few years ago, two groups of scientists discovered that elephants have 20 copies of a tumor suppressor gene called TP53. Most animals, including us, have one copy.
And again, that number is now out of date. They found other regions of the genome have these copies as well. So this is actually, these 20 copies would equate to the 40 that they mentioned in the other video, because there's 2 chromosomes and each one has 1 copy. So you have the 20 total pairs, 40 total raw number, but that is even connected even more. So now there's, like we said, there's upwards of 60 copies of these P53. They're not necessarily this TP53, the tumor suppressor P53, but they're also P53s that are involved in preventing tumors. Hello, Sent One. Welcome on in. Sent, we're talking about the connection between elephants and cancer today. Sent, I hope you're having a great evening, or I guess afternoon as well. Welcome the heck in. If we turn these off in elephants, do they get tumors? So, Smikes, we cannot turn off these in elephants, so you cannot test it in an elephant. Number one, they're endangered. Number two, there's ethical laws at play because of how self-aware and how smart they are. However, Smikes, you can do the next best thing. You can mutate these P53 genes in a cell line, and you can, or like the same experiment that they just did in that previous video, right? They put in the normal elephant tumor suppressors in human cells and found that the human cancer cells were killed. If you put in the mutated versions, those cells don't die. And so that's the connection between that. Cell lines are already mutated. It depends, GZ. You can get primary cell lines. Primary cell lines are direct from a tumor or direct from a patient. Like primary neurons or neurons growing on a dish. And they have a shelf life. They will die eventually. They're not immortalized. So it just depends on what cell you're working with. The ones that they were working with here they've used a couple of different cancer cell lines, which yes are mutated, but they're mutated also because they're cancer. Cancers are immortalized, so you can have tons of them in a dish, and they just keep growing and growing and growing and growing. You can make this cell immortal by just editing this one gene. Not just this one, so GZP53 is the master regulator. If you continue to mutagenize a cell, you might hit things that'll allow it to keep growing and dividing. This is just a regulator that will prevent a mutagenized cell from growing. There's other things that you can continue to grow, other genes that you can mutate to allow the cells to become immortalized. It's not just this one particular gene, but this getting rid of this one means there can be more mutations at play that allows the cells to grow better and better.
The gene makes the protein P53, which can help fix damaged DNA and even kills cells if the DNA is messed up beyond.
You can make cell lines by editing some of those genes? Yes. So GZ, what GZ's asking folks is, can you make cells that are immortalized in a lab by editing a few genes? Yes, you can. That is not limited to mouse cells or human cells. You can use fruit fly cells, you can use elephant cells, you can really use whatever you want. And those things, it's quite amazing that you can do that, and you can have this amazing visibility and work on these particular animals. Yeah. And you can just study the cells in a lab forever.
And repair. So because elephants have more of this protein, they have some extra protection from cancerous growths. In fact, it's so much protection that they have around 100 times as many cells as us and still get tumors less often. But it turns out that's not only thanks to TP53. This week, geneticists at the University of Chicago reported that elephants have another trick up their trunks: zombie genes. If you're unfamiliar with the term, don't worry. It seems like these researchers came up with it just for the paper, which, by the way, sure, do that. Go, you be you, scientists. And actually, zombie pretty much nails what it is and does. The gene was reanimated over the course of evolution, and its job is to kill cells. Basically, the researchers noticed that elephants have extra copies of another gene called leukemia inhibitory factor, or LIF. A few elephant relatives do too, like manatees and a rabbit-like African mammal called the rock hyrax. But in those animals, the extra copies of LIF don't seem to work. The geneticists think that most of the copies are pseudogenes, basically flawed versions of genes that came about because of either sloppy gene duplication or mutation after duplication. So they're recognizable bits and pieces when we look at the DNA, but they don't do anything. One of the elephant copies of LIF does seem to work though. Normally, LIF can either help cells survive or self-destruct, depending on how much of its sequence is turned into protein. The working extra copy in elephants only has the part that helps kill cells, which could help stop cancerous ones from spreading.
So you could imagine if this gene was isolated, maybe these can also be placed into tumors and further help kill particular targeted cells, make them more susceptible to cell death.
It's called LIF6. To find out what LIF6 does, the researchers grew elephant cells in petri dishes. Elephant cells are incredibly sensitive to DNA damage, so they die really easily when scientists add toxic chemicals. But when the team reduced the amount of LIF6 protein the cells could make, the cells were less sensitive. And when the team jacked up the protein, the cells were so sensitive that the scientists didn't even need to add toxic chemicals to make them die. This reveals a downside to being cancer resistant. Sure, you want to avoid letting a tumor grow, but you also don't want to make it too easy for your cells to die either.
And this is the difficulty of then inserting these copies into human cells, right? It would be great if we could target it to the cancer cells and they are more easily to die than their neighboring normal wild-type counterparts. But how do you target them to a particular cell population and not have it spread further out? Yep. Is the current theory that as long as there have been multicellular organisms, there have been cancer? I am not sure, Smikes. The reason being is because if you define cancer as rudimentary, uncontrolled cell growth, which would have to be the definition we're going with, there are some multicellular organisms that if you get the mutation that that would cause that to happen, the organism would just die. So I think if you're defining cell death based on that mutation as still possibly being cancer, then yes, but it gets complicated very quickly. Even singular cellular organisms like yeast, you can modulate p53, and you'll start getting a ton of mutations accumulating, and then eventually the organism dies out. So even single-celled organisms can end up dying from over-proliferation and not protecting their genome. But it starts getting into a little bit of the terminology and definitions on that front. But good question. GZ, did you see that brain tumor they cured by injecting a gene-edited viruses? I have not seen the 60-minute documentary, GZ, but that sounds really, really cool. The gene-edited viruses, GZ, usually what you do with those, you remove their genetic information, and then you have your own payload, which is what they call the cargo, that you load up the virus in, and they deliver it ideally to a particular site. Usually you have to inject at the site of where you want them to be, so they disseminate based on just concentration at the injection site, but they'll hit all the neurons, and they'll inject their cargo into the neurons. We've actually been doing that methodology for decades at this point. It's just making sure that you're targeting what you want to be hitting in a cancer context. Vaccine against glioblastoma, which is nuts. That is pretty nuts, Matty.
One thing for elephants is that their restored LIF6 gene evolved sequences that let it be controlled by p53. So this cell-killing gene doesn't normally do much unless there's DNA damage.
So this is back to how Maddie had said that there is a cycle. So if there's this LP6 that readily kills cells that have any kind of DNA damage, but it's usually turned off by p53. If p53 is activated, because and it's monitoring the DNA, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, let's stop because there's DNA damage. If p53 hits the threshold of, hey, we should be killing the cells, what it can actually do then is turn on this LIF6, and when LIF6 turns on, it kills the cell that the p53 is trying to regulate. So there's a lot of work that it can happen inside the cell as all these components are breaking down left, right, and center. So it's a really nice feedback loop. It's like, hey, p53 says we need to stop. p53 checks the DNA. All of a sudden, it finds a site of DNA mutagenesis. It then will recruit and start the transcription of this LIF6, and that'll kill the cell. Do we know how p53 works? To the GZ, there's hundreds of papers on that. So it binds to DNA, and it at a particular it binds to DNA, and it goes along the DNA, and it tries to find if there's a mutation on the site of the DNA. And a lot of what we know is if mutating it yields cancer because of this. So there's hundreds, if not thousands, of papers on p53. However, more and more people are still they're still studying p53, because if you can identify what is how to correct p53 mutation, you can stop that uncontrolled cell growth. Because the reason the cells keep dividing is because you don't have p53 halting the cell division process, because p53 can stop cell division. Check and see if the DNA is messed up. If it's broken but it can be corrected, it'll correct it, and then it'll resume cell division. But usually in this case, if you've mutated p53, right, then there's nothing to stop cell division. The cells that divide will have mutations, and then it keeps adding. So if you can somehow correct that mutated p53, you should be able to correct all the downstream effects. And I agree with Smikes. If you can figure that out, that has a lot of Nobel Prizes written on it. Actually, GZ, we can pull up the pathway for P53 just to show you how complicated this is. Let me pull up the figure. Okay. So, broken DNA can be corrected. Yes, because even like evil, if you're outside and you get hit with UV light from the sun, that can break your DNA. And normally that might just kill your cell, but this can correct it and fix it, and then you can continue living and surviving. So all these blobs are proteins or enzymes or transcription factors that interact somehow. And you can see these upward on top of the cell are stressors. And so you can have everything from heat, nutrient deprivation, genotoxic drugs, that's things that mutate the genome, ultraviolet, gamma radiation, and much, much more, right? Hypoxia, this all like how it feeds into DNA damage, but basically there's all these molecules all feed into this green circle right here. And that's P53. P53 then will bind to the DNA, and it can yield up to things like that negative feedback. It can DNA repair and damage. It inhibits metastasis and just cell growth and angiogenesis. It can yield apoptosis, programmed cell death. It can arrest cell division and cell cycle arrest overall. So it's doing a whole bunch of things. All these little like arrows, if you get rid of P53 up here, all of this goes away. So there's no cell cycle arrest. There's no programmed cell death. There's no inhibition of metastasis. There's no DNA repair. There's no inhibition of this IGF-1 mTOR pathway, which is cell growth. There's no mediated secretion signals to tell other cells that this is happening. Getting rid of P53 nerfs this entire pathway of protection. It's wild to think like that, right? Gamma radiation equals gains in the gym. So Evil Petty, listen. In Marvel Universe it does, but not here. It is a transcription factor, GZ. It binds to DNA. So that makes it a particular transcription factor. That is a flavor of protein. But it has particular sites that allow it to bind DNA. Not all proteins have that. So it's a subclassification of a certain kind of protein. And again, the elephant having 60 copies allows it to like have some resilience built into this. Towards night, it'll not make you strong. No, I don't even strong. Listen, towards night, strong. Strongs is like when people tell me I'm feeling sage. I don't really know what that means. And so when someone messages me that I'm feeling sage, I'm like, are you feeling zen with your life? And turns out it means you're feeling sad. Same thing with strong towards night. I don't really understand what strong means. I assume it's strong. But maybe it's not towards night. I just want to make sure that I'm aware of how these work. It's just a silly way of saying strong. Are you sure towards? Because strong rhymes with Kronk. Kronk is a character in The Emperor's New Groove who is a chef who makes spinach puffs. Yzma does not like spinach puffs and therefore is no longer Kronk's friend at the end of the movie The Emperor's New Groove, which also stars David Spade. So really, strong could mean David Spade towards night. That's what I'm getting at here. I was going to do an experiment. I was going to blast myself with radiation, cover myself with this virus. It'll work. Something will happen. Evil Purdy, I think it'll culminate in death, unfortunately. Whether or not from the spider bite or the dose of the radiation, it will not be good. In fact, Evil Petty, usually the big thing is radiation poisoning rids you of your immune system, and then you're just like, you're just gonna die, unfortunately. Crunk could be a style of funk, perhaps. Crunk is when you get crunk is if you get zesty beats thrown in, like you would have if you visited our friend Towards Night. You can definitely get crunk there sent. I believe so. Why do I feel like Bolin is about to prove that Flat Earth is real because using Strong and Emperor's New Groove is surprising valid data? Not to Flat Earth, Matty Holmes. Not to Flat Earth. I mean, who needs an immune system? Everyone evil! Everyone. Maddie, Emperor's New Groove was a great movie. And then there was a sequel, Kronk's New Groove. It was exceptionally mediocre, at best. But it still had Kronk and spinach puffs. And really, at the end of the day, if you have Kronk and spinach puffs, you're all Gucci. You want to hug the people who believe the earth is flat. Towards night, I'm glad your heart is full of love. I'm glad that your heart is full of love towards night. Alright, so P53 interacts and upregulates LIP6. That together allows the cell to be more likely to die if it's tumorigenic. And we just looked at the P53 pathway, which is insane. I'll post that whole pathway on the Discord if anyone's interested. Again, join the Discord, folks. All this material that we cover here is on there, and they're mentioned in the stream category. But we'll also share art. We do talk about music. We talk about video games. We do daily science trivia, and much, much more. Check out the Discord, folks. Check out the Discord. Imagine all the things cats would be able to knock over the edge. Yeah, Sent, that's what I don't get. If it's flat, are we on the underside or the top side? Because there's no under and top side in space. So that's what confuses me, amongst other things, too. Are the 13 other planets around? Are they? Evil, I have no idea. The theory escapes me. I never know how it all works. But, you know.
When that happens, good old P53 can swing into action, bind to the LIF6 gene, and crank its expression way up. The LIF6 protein then probably punctures the mitochondria, turning those cellular powerhouses into death machines that release chemicals that trigger the demise of the damaged cells. It's killer, but, you know, the helpful kind of killing. Using DNA samples from extinct and living elephants and their relatives, the researchers were also able to roughly piece together when this LIF gene came back to life. Creatures like mastodons and woolly mammoths share what looks like the functional LIF6 gene with today's African and Asian elephants.
So I thought this was a really cool piece of data because, so this right here is a phylogenetic tree. It's looking at evolutionary and genetic relatedness. The length of the lines dictates time. So down here, it has millions of years before presence. That's what the length of the line is dictating, is time that has passed. And then these split points, the bifurcations, are evolution of new species. And then the dot in between the two bars indicates the most recent common ancestor. So if we look back, woolly mammoths have a split point from the Asian elephant, which is more ancient. They split with the Colombian mammoth. And then there's straight tusked elephants split from the African elephant. And the American mastodon is even more further distant related. So it's even the common ancestor there had this LIF6 gene. So it's everyone then in this whole cluster. If the common ancestor had the functional one, then all the evolutionary descendants in theory should have that functional gene. Unless someone loses it along the way. But this is how we can piece together genetic evolution of these animals. Is a person center of gravity because you would view up in space? I have no idea, Sent. Sent, I'm going to be total level with you. I don't subscribe to the theory of the flat Earth. But I am fascinated by the theory. Because I just don't understand. I don't understand! Chat. Hold on. Where's...
You don't understand. You don't understand. If you understood, you wouldn't understand.
Indeed, John. Indeed, Irish John. Saddened by it deeply. Don't be sad towards night. Towards night, you know what happens when you get sad? Please don't make me sad towards night. Red Flat Earth theory, I'm just asking the question. No, Sent, look. It's important to question everything, right? So if someone tells you the flat Earth theory, what we say here is to be curious, not judgmental, right? So ask questions. Well, how does this work? Why does your theory hold water? And then you can be left up to decide for yourself if that's something you subscribe to or that's something that you don't subscribe to. I personally don't, but you know, there's nothing wrong with asking questions about it. People think there's an up and down space based on magnetic polarity, always seen north as upright. Not sure, Evil. Not sure.
whereas manatees and hyraxes don't. That suggests zombification happened sometime between 60 and 30 million years ago. And that timing is especially interesting because this is when elephant ancestors started to really pack on the pounds and get real big. Lift 6 could be one way the animals were able to do that, since it prevented them from getting tumors all over the place, and TP53 duplication could have helped too. So thanks to this research, we now have an even better sense of how elephants came to be so big and relatively cancer-free. We still don't entirely know how other massive animals like whales or long-lived creatures like bats pull it off, but who knows, maybe there are more zombie genes or other genetic tricks out there. Thanks for watching and learning with us, and a big thank you to our Patreon president of Space, Matthew Brandt. Thank you, Matthew, for helping us make SciShow. If you want to join our Patreon community, go to patreon.com/SciShow to learn more.
Towards night, thank you for the 100 biddies. Towards night, sir. Thank you for those biddies, sir. Thank you. So that is another example of how these animals can live long. What I want to look at next, not fire ants, folks, is kind of delving into
cancer,
the blue whale, and why the blue whale also doesn't get cancer. And so it's utilizing the same hypothesis as this Peto's paradox that they mentioned in the last video of a certain, if we have a really, really big animal and it's long-lived, it should be getting cancer. And it's not, like the elephant, and neither is the blue whale. And so these two hypotheses and observations are commonly seen in the animal kingdom, and something that we're going to dissect open and continue to figure out how this may happen. So let us watch why the blue whales don't get cancer, and then I think we'll jump into some fundamental elephant biology for the last little bit of stream today.
Cancer is a creepy and mysterious thing. In the process of trying to understand it, to get better at killing it, we discovered a biological paradox that remains unsolved to this day.
So even though we have hypotheses as to how this might work, to solve this paradox, you'd have to actually prove it in the animal itself, and a lot of these we cannot genetically create an elephant missing these key genes, or a whale, nor can we make it go the opposite direction where we can actually have these animals genes put into something else to make them longer lived or shorter lived. So it just hasn't been fully proven. Hello, Lady Lara Croft. Lady Lara Croft could not fully sneak in, chat. Lady Lara Croft, welcome the heck in. I hope you're doing well, madame. We're talking about the evolutionary connection between cancer resistance in large animals, where it shouldn't be like that. So actually, we've been chatting about how studying elephants, who are very resistant to cancer, could influence and help humans. And then, so it's all based on this theory called Peto's paradox, where large animals who have many more cells than we do, and therefore the cells divide a whole lot more. The question is, why don't they get cancer? And why do we get cancer? And at least in part turns out is because of the number of copies of a gene called P53. P53 is a master regulator of cell growth. And it turns out elephants have far more copies. So they have 60 copies instead of our 1 copy. Or we have a pair and they have 30 pairs. And that is protective on their cells from getting cancer. They're more likely to kill any cell that has a mutation versus with us, if P53 normally will stop cell division, and if it detects a DNA mutation, it kills the cell. But if you mutate that 1 copy, it doesn't do its job anymore, and then you get cancer. Versus, that's in humans. And in elephants, they're just more resilient, because there's so many more copies that would need to be mutated, and it's just not likely to happen. I'm curious, would it be feasible that a factor could be in the DNA it's doing its job? What do you mean, scent? Oh, would it be diet? What do you mean? Wait, hold on. Scent, what do you mean? Which do you mean diet? Diet doing its job? Oh, you mean like a factor in the diet that allows for there to be the resilience in the tumor? So, Scent, that's a great question. If that's what you're asking, Scent. Either way, it's a great question. So, Scent, the way it's been proven is you can take human cancer cells, breast cancer, colon cancer, brain cancer, and you can put, and normally they don't have functional p53. That's a very, very common feature of almost all cancers, is that p53 is mutated. What you can do, Scent, is put on the elephant p53, and all of a sudden those cells get killed. Versus if you put the elephant p53 on normal human cells, those cells do not get killed. So that would be the argument that it's not diet playing the primary role, but it is something genetic. Now, the things that could yield mutations could be caused by diet and prevented by diet, right? Because you have metabolism has been shown to be a really big part of influencing the formation of tumors in our bodies. And so if you eat things that are high in antioxidants, in theory, although unproven, that should help to prevent the formation of tumors. But it seems it's much more like it's founded in genetics and maybe in some part affected by diet. Does that make sense, Sant? Hi, Risto. How you doing, Risto? So the elephant to human, Lady Lara Croft, it kills the cancer cells, but it doesn't kill the normal cells. So that's putting in the elephant p53 copy. So the idea is there are researchers trying to utilize this observation to help patients who have cancer. So that is a finger cross that we can actually get that to work. And how cool would it be as if you're treating cancer by adding in elephant genes. The big thing, Lady Lara Croft, is making sure it's delivered to the right location, and they want it to be transient. They don't want it to be a long-lasting effect, because the catch with elephant p53 is they also have an additional gene called LIP. Those two work together to kill the cells that have high mutational loads. They can also kill cells if you turn up LIP too much that are not cancerous. So their way of preventing cancer is just to kill their cells with mutations unapologetically. Versus our threshold is a little bit higher. Like, we're less likely to kill a cell with a mutation. We're more likely to try to repair it. And it might be something where bigger animals have so many more cells that it's easier to work with. Not entirely sure how that would work. Hello, Amber. Welcome in, Amber. Yeah, there's much, and it seems Lady Lara Croft. Yep, we're actually Lady Lara Croft, ma'am, you are right on time for it. We are getting into the blue whales as well. They have this same paradox called Peto's paradox. You would predict that the bigger animal is more likely to get cancer because it has so many more cells and it's dividing so many more times. So how does that work? So we're about to touch on the blue whale, Lady Lara Croft. Perfect timing, man. Perfect timing. Gene editing can prevent so many issues. I hope it doesn't prevent us from exploring. Yes. Yeah, evil. It's, yeah, space-worthy ones. Absolutely. It's not just fear, too. It's, the ethics behind when it's okay and what is okay to edit, right? It's that threshold evil of, like, should I be able to make a designer baby where I change every feature of my child and, like, design exactly all its features, and it's, behind a paywall, so only the wealthy do it, versus gene editing to remove a particular disease state? It's a complicated ethical dilemma. Yeah. Amber, doing all right. I dropped my sister off at the airport today. She visited us from Wednesday evening to today. And just been, was hanging out with the little one until the stream. We went on a nice walk today. We watched some soccer today. We even watered the plants outside. I was holding her and we were watering some plants. So she's with Lita right now. And then I think we'll do... Saturdays are usually our date night. We do a fun, usually like a romantic comedy, some kind of movie, and then we have like a nice meal together. So we'll still be doing that tonight. There is a giant thunderstorm coming in this evening, which is unfortunate, because we had hoped that we would be able to walk into town to grab dinner, but it looks like like 7-ish, there's gonna be a thunderstorm, so we'll have to see what time we're able to get out and get dinner. But yeah, that's the plan for the evening. All right, let's get into why the blue whale doesn't have cancer.
Large animals seem to be immune to cancer, which doesn't make any sense. The bigger a being, the more cancer it should have. To understand why, we first need to take a look at the nature of cancer itself.
I love storms too, Crystal. I loved them more when I was not a homeowner. Now that I'm a homeowner, I think of storms like, oh God, what am I going to have to pay for? But I love sleeping. Like, if there's a storm, not necessarily a giant one, but just like rain, right? Like with the window open and listening to the drops, raindrops, I think it's very soothing. Yeah, it was just, we were hoping to get out and like go, you know, like on a walk to get dinner, and like, you know, because you can take the little one and go take her to go get dinner as well. Like, you know, we're not gonna eat at a restaurant, but we can do the pickup and get a nice walk in, and it's just, you know, like a nice feel to it. I like them if I'm able to rest though. Like, I like listening to the storm, feeling like not like really intense thunderstorms. Yeah, the rumbling one. Exactly. Evil's right. The rumbling ones. Not the ones where the whole house shakes. Right? Like with the thunder sound. Like, I don't want those. I just want, you know, like a nice... It's off in the distance. And we have a nice time. You know? That's what I'm hoping for anyway. Alright, let's take a look into Tumor in the concert. By the way, this is a great video series. Their animations are really, really well done, and they usually explain the science really nicely. Praised our roof 2 years ago because of the storm. Every time a storm hits out... Yes, Lady Lara Croft, you are in the same boat as I am. I'm always like, oh goodness, what are we going to have to pay for? Because Lady Lara Croft, first summer we moved in here. The neighboring tree... The neighbor had this giant tree, and it fell over into our yard and took out 2 of our trees. So there are 3 trees on our yard now. And as per New Jersey law, it was our responsibility to pay for it. They had to pay for like the little bit that was still on their yard, but all of it's our responsibility. So even if my tree falls over on someone's house, I'm not liable at all, which I guess is fine. But so we had to, and it was, Lita was like, oh, I use a chainsaw. I'm like, honey, do not use a chainsaw on these 3 massive trees, because they weren't thin, they were very large trees, and so it didn't hit anything in the yard, luckily. But so then yeah, we had to get someone to chop it all up. It was not Gucci. Now that I've been here a while, I just want to say congrats on your new baby. Oh, thank you, Amber. Yes, she was born 3 months ago this week will be. Yeah, we have pictures of her up on the Discord because she's a cutie patootie. And she was actually here at the beginning of stream today. Usually they have laws. No, New Jersey loves laws, Evil Petty. They love laws. There are the most laws here because they regulate everything, and everything is taxed. It's insane. That's absolutely insane. You cannot pump your own gas in the state of New Jersey. Doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. First time I visited, I was like, I get out of my car to go fill up my gas, and they're like, sir, you can't do that. And like, excuse me? And yeah, it's like you give your credit card to someone, and they swipe for you, and they fill up your own gas, and you're like not allowed near it. I'm like, I don't like this at all. Oh, Sen, you can't pump your own gas because they made up jobs with this law so that randos will get jobs. It's a weird socialist law about creating jobs that are unnecessary. Turning right at stop. Yes, you cannot turn right. No, you can turn right at a stop sign. You can't turn left. Can't turn left in a lot of places. But let's continue on the elephant cancer and whatnot. I know, Lady Lara Croft. That's what freaked me out. Giving my Oh, community challenge complete, chat. We have completed a community challenge. We have 100% at a community challenge. Let's see which one. Let's see which one is complete, chat. Discord movie night is happening. All right, chat. That means in the next few weeks we will schedule a Discord movie night where we'll watch the cinematic masterpiece, The Mummy, starring Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, and Arnold Vosloo. It will probably be on a Sunday. I imagine it'll probably be on a Sunday. But I'll double check and figure out when that'll be. The other one that we are looking for filling up are 2 other community challenges. One is to debut the new SciAnts music video, the brand new version, and the other one is a game night, a SciAnts stream game night. Guys, 500,000 channel points in there for Discord and Movie Night. Thank you all for raising that. We will schedule it on the docket. Again, probably going to be a Sunday or a Tuesday. Those will be the 2 potential dates that we'll have it. I will give you all the actual dates as well. Probably not next week, but maybe the week after we'll have our movie night. Crystal! Thank you for the biddies, Crystal. 111 biddies. Thank you, Crystal, for those biddies. All right. Let's continue, chat.
Our cells are protein robots made out of hundreds of millions of parts. Guided only by chemical reactions, they create and dismantle structures, sustain a metabolism to gain energy, or make almost perfect copies of themselves. We call these complex chemical reactions pathways. They are biochemical networks upon networks, intertwined and stacked on top of each other. Most of them can barely be comprehended by a single human mind, and yet they function perfectly.
No! Hi, Alex. Alex, you caught me in my eye, which is actually fine, Alex. I'm having a little bit of dry eye today. As we've been streaming, I think it's honestly like the lights and the computer screen. My eyes have been drying out, but I appreciate the rehydration on my eyes, Alex Vixen. Alex, how the heck are you doing, Alex? As we're talking about the connection between cancer resistance in elephants and now blue whales. Alex, I might just have to take my contacts out, honestly. Like I'm like squinting and like constantly having to do more and more. Dries off a few days ago all day. Yeah, Crystal, that's why I don't wear my contacts usually on stream either. And during the day, if I'm working on the computer, my eyes just end up hurting. But because I took Dory to the airport today, because I went and drove, it was just I just prefer to drive in my contacts rather than my glasses. Because the glasses, if you look above and below the frame, then it's all out of focus, and it's it's not. You're messing. Oh. That's fair, Crystal. That's fair. All right, let's continue. Great to see you, Alex.
Until they don't. With billions of trillions of reactions happening in thousands of networks over many years, the question is not if something will go wrong, but when. Tiny mistakes add up until the grandiose machinery gets corrupted.
And that's when P53 comes in to kill the cell. Just realized I don't have to bite a blue whale to get their anti-cancer stuff. I just checked the top, and they seem to have a very convenient straw hole. Evil Petty. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Can't play low game, messing, follow me around. I'm not sure, Crystal, what that means. But I hope everything's okay.
To prevent this from getting out of hand, our cells have kill switches that make them commit suicide. But these kill switches are not infallible.
Hi, Crux. Why did the coffee file a police report? Why? Why did the coffee file a police report? Crux, you have me on edge. It got mugged. Oh my god. Well done. Well done, Crux. That is, listen, Crux, I should have seen that coming because we have a friend by the name of Carlo the Stream Scribe who used to do muggings. And by muggings, I meant he would give you you could win a mug on his channel. And he called it a mugging. Very good, Crux. Very good. Welcome on in.
If they fail, a cell can turn into a cancer cell. Most of them are slain by the immune system very quickly. But this is a numbers game. Given enough time, a cell will accrue enough mistakes, slip by unnoticed, and begin making more of itself. All animals have to deal with this problem. In general, the cells of different animals are the same size. The cells of a mouse aren't smaller than yours, it just has fewer cells in total and a shorter lifespan. Fewer cells and a short life means a lower chance of things going wrong or cells mutating. Or at least it should mean that.
That's the paradox again of the size of the animal and the number of total cells. I like coming in when I get to learn new things. Yeah, Crux, we've been talking about why elephants and large animals are resistant to cancer, which is counterintuitive, but that's what we're chatting about today. Welcome on in. Actually, chat, I'm going to put up a quick BRB and take out my contacts because I am having some trouble seeing. So I will be right back, y'all. I'm going to switch out my contacts and put my glasses back on. Don't go anywhere, folks. I'll be right back. All right. Sorry about that, y'all. I also closed some of the windows in the house because the whole outside is starting to turn quite dark. And we had a bunch of the windows open. And I don't want Lita to have to feel like she has to jump up with the little one and start closing some windows. So I closed a couple of the windows to make sure that everything stays Gucci, as it were. All right, so let's go ahead and try to answer the paradox of why, like, again, long-lived animals more likely to get cancer, but then all of a sudden we get larger, longer-lived animals that aren't getting ones.
Humans live about 50 times longer and have 1,000 times more cells than mice. Yet the rate of cancer is basically the same in humans and in mice.
Yeah, Evil, we are getting hit with it pretty... It keeps changing. It's supposed to hit earlier in the day. Yeah, it right, Grimly, it's changing like mad. I just looked on the radar and it looks like it's gonna be it looks like it's the red part of the storm that's gonna hit us now, Grimly, at like 7. But then it looks like it's gonna be gone pretty fast. But then I'm not entirely sure because, yeah, like it just, now it looks like it's staying on us for a little bit longer. And at midnight there's gonna be more red. I'm not sure, Grimly. But we'll see. Hopefully it won't be anything too crazy. We got the calm before the storm right now. It's flowy, but the tree branches are... Yeah, same here, Evil. It's like everything's dark outside and I can hear the wind creeping. I'm actually going to close this window as well before anything gets crazy. Last thing we need is the rain coming on in and hitting the computer. That would be unfortunate, Chad. Blunt would be very stressed out about that. Boy. All right. Continue.
Even weirder, blue whales with about 3,000 times more cells than humans don't seem to get cancer at all, really. This is Peto's paradox, the baffling realization that large animals have much, much less cancer than they should. Scientists think there are two main ways of explaining the paradox: evolution and hypertumors. Solution 1: evolve or become a blob of cancer. As multicellular beings developed 600 million years ago, animals became bigger and bigger, which added more and more cells, and hence more and more chances that cells could be corrupted. So the collective had to invest in better and better cancer defenses. The ones that did not died out. But cancer...
Hi, Thindall. Did you know that if you're a scientist, there's a chance that you're as smart as Belinda Lita? Or as Belinda Lita and Alona? Thindall, that is not true. You do not have to be a scientist to be smart. You, in fact, don't even have to be degreed to be smart, Thindall. Guys, go check out the amazing Thindall. Web dev extraordinaire is Thindall, and also the most handsome man in the country of Sweden. Love your face, Thindall. How's it going? Hope you're having a great day, Thindall. We're talking about the relationship between large animals and resilience and resistance to cancer. It's a paradox, and it was our elephant deep dive that I ended up hijacking and becoming a biomedical cancer chat today. We will talk more about general elephant biology on Thursday of this week, because that's kind of where I was originally going to be starting, because it was going to, you know, we're going to dive into elephants on Earth Day, but I was like, you know what? The connection between cancer resistance in elephants is far too cool to not make it its own stream. So that's why I decided to do that. Just on my way home from a friend's jacuzzi. Did you get in the jacuzzi? Thindal, were you inside the jacuzzi? Number one. That's an important question, Thindal. Live in your chat. No, that's not true, because Evil, if you don't know what ChatGPT is telling you, then it could be the wrong thing, and it could be telling you made up stuff, and then you have to have that filter there, I think. Drive-through queue to get me a milkshake. What kind of milkshake, Thindal? Is it a chocolate, or is it vanilla, or is it anything? Tell me all things. In fact, in the jacuzzi, very nice, Thindal. Thindal, what kind of deliciousness are you having? I hope it's amazing, Thindal.
Doesn't just happen, it's a process that involves many individual mistakes and mutations in several specific genes within the same cell. These genes are called proto-oncogenes, and when they mutate, it's bad news. For example, with the right mutation, a cell will lose its ability to kill itself. Another mutation, and it will develop the ability to hide. Another, and it will send out calls for resources. Another one, and it will multiply quickly. These oncogenes have an antagonist though, tumor suppressor genes. They prevent these critical mutations from happening or order the cell to kill itself if they decide it's beyond repair.
And so why do we even have proto-oncogenes? They're regulating cell growth. And growth is good, but you need a counter to that. And the counter to it is these tumor suppressor genes. Chocolate or banana split. Ooh, Thindal, that sounds delicious. Dairy-free, sugar-free milkshake. As long as Thindal enjoys it, Evil Petty, that's what I would like. Yes, Thindal, they have great videos.
It turns out that large animals have an increased number of them. Because of this, elephant cells require more mutations than mice cells to develop a tumor. They are not immune, but more resilient. This adaptation probably comes with a cost in some form, but researchers still aren't sure what it is.
One cost of that we saw was Lin6 in the elephants. Lin6 is upregulated, meaning turned on higher, which kills a lot more cells. It will even kill non-cancerous cells. So that's probably one of the trade-offs. There's presumably other ones, but unless you know to look for that, you might never find it.
Maybe tumor suppressors make elephants age quicker later in life or slow down how quickly injuries heal. We don't know yet. But the solution to the paradox may actually be something different. Hypertumors. Solution 2. Hypertumors. Yes, really. Hypertumors are named after hyperparasites, the parasites of parasites. Hypertumors are the tumors of tumors. Cancer can be thought of as a breakdown in cooperation. Normally, cells work together to form structures like organs, tissue, or elements of the immune system. But cancer cells are selfish and only work for their own short-term benefit. If they're successful, they form tumors, huge cancer collectives that can be very hard to kill. Making a tumor is hard work though. Millions or billions of cancer cells multiply rapidly, which requires a lot of resources and energy. The amount of nutrients they can steal from the body becomes the limiting factor for growth. So the tumor cells trick the body to build new blood vessels directly to the tumor to feed the thing killing it. And here, the nature of cancer cells may become their own undoing. Cancer cells are inherently unstable, and so they can continue to mutate, some of them faster than their buddies. If they do this for a while, at some point, one of the copies of the original cancer cell might suddenly think of itself as an individual again and stop cooperating. Which means, just like the body, the original tumor suddenly becomes an enemy, fighting for the same scarce nutrients and resources. So the newly mutated cells can create a hypertumor. Instead of helping, they cut off the blood supply to their former buddies, which will starve and kill the original cancer cells. Cancer is killing cancer.
Just wild, right? That is an effect that we can visualize and have happen inside the body. Absolutely crazy. Makes sense that something like this could happen, but on the part of the cancer, it's, it's short-sighted. Obviously, it's not thinking and has any kind of awareness, but just the rapid breakdown of cooperation in this like collective microorganism is pretty wild.
This process can repeat over and over. and this may prevent cancer from becoming a problem for a large organism. It is possible that large animals have more of these hypertumors than we realize. They might just not become big enough to notice.
So the hypothesis is that you constantly have these hypotumors forming on top of existing tumors, and they keep taking out the threat before it's actually a threat buildup. So one takes out the other, it starts to grow a little, and then something else takes it out, and it starts to grow, and it continues the loop. We don't know of enough evidence to fully argue that that's what's happening, but that is one possibility. Cancer, Game of Thrones, backstab with the picture. I know, evil. It's like it's your favorite soap opera since. I don't know, I guess since Game of Thrones.
Which makes sense. A 2-gram tumor is 10% of a mouse's body weight, while it's less than 0.0002% of a human, and 0.000002% of a blue whale. All 3 tumors require the same number of cell divisions and have the same number of cells. So an old blue whale might be filled with tiny cancers and just not care. There are other proposed solutions to Peto's paradox, such as different metabolic rates or different cellular architecture. But right now we just don't know. Scientists are working on the problem. Figuring out how large animals are so resilient to one of the most deadly diseases we know could open the path to new therapies and treatments. Cancer has always been a challenge. Today, we are finally beginning to understand it, and by doing so, one day, we might finally overcome it. This video was sponsored by you.
The larger the animal's slower metabolism. Not always. Not always, Mike. Sometimes that is the case, and that would argue towards the longer lifespan, because it's been shown in a lot of different animals, if you have caloric restriction, then the animals live longer. For example, if you starve a fruit fly, it lives longer than one that gets unlimited food resources, which is quite remarkable that something like that happens. But that's not the case for every large animal. And there are other tumor-creating factors as well. Hi, Subo Substrate, welcome in. Is this an Earth Day metaphor for corporate greed as cancer? I don't know what that means, Suitable Substrate. We are chatting about elephants and how they have resistance, higher levels of resistance to cancer than what we do, and that's in part based on their genetic architecture, which I think is really, really exciting and showing that connection between tumors, cancer, resilience. That's where I was going with the Earth Day feel to it. Caloric restriction with a chatter just with a drive-through with an apple pie milkshake. Yes, but Thindall, everything in a balance, right? If you overdo on one end and you don't eat, that will also yield a negative effect, right? So it's everything in moderation is okay, Thindall. Now, to what end? That I don't know, Thindall, but presumably there's some end to it too. Hello, Felicity91. Welcome on in, Felicity. How you doing, Felicity? We're chatting about cancer and elephants today and other large animals. The end game is we don't fully understand what is protecting large animals
come in all
from cancer, but this is the most up-to-date video and data that I could find. And I think this is where we might finish it out actually with the evening. Is it a medium milkshake, Thindall? That's okay. I think long-term mankind's destiny is to master life, death. If you fall into lava, you go offline and stop suffering, but for the most part, we'll just stop dying. Maybe, Evil Petty. Possibly. Doing very well. Hope you are doing. I'm doing all right, Felicity. There's about to be a very nasty storm, it looks like, here. So I'm hoping, like, it won't damage anything in the house. You know, everything's okay. But it's, you check the radar and it's like red coming through. And I keep looking at it because I'm like, I actually ran through the house a few minutes ago and closed off all the windows to make sure that, you know, not it's gonna come, because we had a nice, like, it was a nice day today, so I had all the windows open and the little one was enjoying the open windows. But now it's like we're getting hit by a storm, and maybe it's like 8 o'clock and then it's just regular rain, and then we might get hit with something else later. But it keeps shifting. Like 10 minutes ago it was different than what it is now. So it's like 10 minutes ago we're gonna get hit red a couple of times versus like now it looks like it's only red once. Who knows? But yeah, talking about the why don't big animals get more cancer? In particular, it started off on elephant deep divery, but then we just I shifted it to just like in general the biology of these animals from just why they're resilient to cancer for it. Endless sandbox to explore with. I'm sure the universe is more wonderful and strange than we can imagine. For sure. Extreme long spells will help greatly. Yeah, absolutely evil. Absolutely. Alright, so let's finish out with this video then.
All shapes and sizes, but every complex multicellular creature has one thing in common. It started life as one cell. That cell and all of the cells that it spawns copy themselves, divide, and transform again and again and again to build specialized complex bodies containing anywhere from millions of cells to more than 1,000 trillion individual living units. A body like yours contains around 37 trillion cells. To build a human, factoring in the huge number of cells that die and are lost along the way, scientists estimate it takes 10 to the 16th cell divisions. During your lifetime, that's 10 million billion times that the machinery of the cell and its DNA instructions will be copied, which is a lot of chances to make mistakes. Every cell division carries a risk of creating errors and mutations.
And I know this is something that we've talked about a couple of times today. We're just trying to hammer it down the point that why this is such a paradox and why it's so cool that the elephants and blue whales aren't getting cancer.
Most of these are harmless, but a few rare mutations can destroy the genetic programs or break down the machinery that control a cell's life and death, giving it the power to divide uncontrollably. We call this cancer. So, logically speaking, the larger an animal is and the longer that it lives, it should be more likely to get cancer. In fact, because humans are living longer and longer, the odds of developing cancer at some point in your lifetime are about 20%. And it's been found that for every 10 centimeters taller a person is, their risk of developing cancer goes up by 10%. When you consider all of this, the obvious conclusion is, biologically and mathematically speaking, giant, long-lived animals like elephants should have all the cancer.
So, Evil, there is some disagreement in how that works, right? So there's evidence to suggest that it's not just based on something like height and like vertical size. So it's been very debated, that particular bullet point, because there's a lot of environmental factors at play as well. And so while there's a correlation in some populations, there's not correlations in others, and so it's a little bit questionable.
So should blue whales, and hippos, and giraffes, and rhinoceroses, and megalodon. Hey smart people, Joe here. Let's run some quick numbers. The average human weighs about 70 kilograms and has approximately 37 trillion cells in their body. An elephant that weighs 5,000 kilograms, well, that's 70 times more cells than a human has. A blue whale, the largest thing to live on Earth ever, weighs about 150,000 kilograms, which means it has over 2,000 times as many cells as a human. About 79 million billion cells, which is nuts.
We don't think, Evil, that they're getting any more cancer. There hasn't been any data to suggest that, which is also interesting then, right? With all the pollutants, they're still resilient.
Giant animal means more cells. More cells equals more cell divisions, and more cell divisions means more chances of mutations that could let a cell become cancerous. So, an elephant should have like 70 times higher odds of cancer than you or me. And for a blue whale then, it should be like 2,000 times higher.
Gotcha, Evil. Gotcha.
I think that math works out. Well, logic says that giant animals should get tons of cancer. But the weird thing is, they just don't. This puzzle is known as Peto's paradox because scientists love alliteration, and because it's named after a scientist named Richard Peto. Peto noticed that even though mice have 1,000 times fewer cells than humans and have lifespans 30 times shorter, both species get cancer at about the same rate. And
there's this theory, Mama, that large animals tend not to get cancer. And it's weird because you'd suspect it actually would be the opposite. If you have more cells, you have an increased likelihood of being cancer, but that seems to not be true. So this graph actually very nicely illustrates that you'd expect it to be the vertical one, or the one that's just keep going up and up and up, the red line. But actually, it's like the blue line where the actual cancer rate is pretty high to start with, and then it goes downward. And it seems like these larger animals, like elephants and whales, have protective genetics against cancer. One of these particulars, they were studying elephant genes and actually utilizing the elephant gene called P53 as a cancer treatment. We have P53 in our cells, in all of our cells, but we just have one copy, or a copy pair. Elephants have 60. And so they are just much better at fighting off cancer cells than we are. And it seems like other large animals might have the same kind of mechanism at play. We still don't fully understand how it works, but that's something that we are actively researching, and that was the deep dive foray in today. I originally thought I was just going to be going into elephants, but I got personally rabbit hole because this was like the primary genetics that are studied in elephants of their cancer resilience. Hello, Dacum! Dacum, how are you doing, Dacum? Dacum. The lovely Dacum, Chad Dacum and I hang out all the time together on California Bird Stream. I'll give them a shout out in just one moment. How you doing, Dacum? All right, let's continue, folks. Let's continue.
Together, we can rule the galaxy.
Dacum, thank you for the resub at 17 months! Dacum, thank you so very much for that resub and that ongoing sub. Madame, happy Saturday. It is great to have you here. I know normally we're not live on a Saturday, but we took 3 days during the week because my little sister was visiting. I dropped her off at the airport this morning, so that's why we decided, you know what? To make sure we still get our 4 days in this week. That's why we're here today. Lovely to see you, Dacum, and thank you so much for the resub. And again, folks, go check out California Burbs. Hi, Andrew CZ. Welcome back. Andrew, how was dinner? How was dinner with the friendly people, Andrew CZ? I know, Dacum, 17 months. My God, that's almost a year. It's almost 2 years. Andrew, I hope you had a delicious meal.
body size, lifespan, and cancer rates just don't seem to be associated like you'd predict from numbers alone. So what is protecting the animal kingdom's utmost examples of enormity and old age from an unfortunate end thanks to oncological illness? Was that too much? Why big thing not get cancer? It's possible.
That's the question, chap. Dinner was awesome. We had lawn care day at the church. I've been going since 8 a.m. I'm exhausted. I feel that, Andrew. I feel that. Andrew, I wanted to do some lawn care today, but, you know, early in the morning, I got up with Dory and we took her to the airport, and then I was hanging out with the little one. We went on a walk, we watered, and I was going to do some lawn care, but then I was finishing getting ready for stream around like 2:15, and then I was like, we might be doing it tomorrow. So I need to weed whack, Andrew. There's a lot of, I mowed the grass and everything last weekend, but a lot of weeds have just, and so the yard is like mostly flat, but then there's like all these like little nubs now of weeds. I wasn't gonna rake Dacum. Dacum, that's not later. I had someone else weed whack. I gotcha. I'm sorry, Andrew. I'm sorry, I think. With the emote, I'm not sure if that's a positive or a negative, but I love your face, Andrew CZ. Hi, WizKid.
That large animals have evolved better mechanisms for catching.
Got a lot done today. It feels good. It is a good feeling, especially, Andrew, when it's like not necessarily like work related stuff. It's just like at the house or at like a community, or like not even necessarily like for fun, but it's like this other thing beyond your job that you believe in and you're passionate about, and it just feels good. So like I totally get that. I'm glad that you had a good day, Andrew. I'm glad the meal was good. I'm glad the lawn care was good, and just that you're doing well, my friend. I love your face very, very extremely to the maximum. Andrew CZ. Chat again if you're not checking out Andrew CZ. You're not doing life right. A Greco-Roman god, our friend is right here. An absolute kind legend he is. Definition of weed is an undesirable flower, so all weeds are flowers. They are flowers. Jason is very angry about the weed. It was fast-growing flowers, Smikes, that I would like to nerf. I need to get rid of. I'm glad you got home safely, Thindall. How was the apple milkshake, Thindall? Apple pie milkshake. Dang it, Jason.
And correcting mutations before they get too dangerous. Now, for a cell to go down the pathway to cancer, it usually requires more than one mutation in more than one type of cancer-causing gene. There are so-called oncogenic or tumor-producing genes. Now, when these are mutated and broken, they're basically always on, and they're telling the cell to keep dividing uncontrollably. But there are also genes whose job it is to keep cells from doing that, the so-called tumor suppressor genes. Tumor suppressor genes work by acting as a kind of roadblock, keeping cell division from moving forward, or as signals to self-destruct the cell if things go wrong. Now, interestingly, when scientists looked at the genome of elephants for one particular tumor suppressor gene, they had 20 copies of it, and we have just one copy of it. This means that an elephant's tumor-preventing security system has like 20-layer redundancy. Larger animals also have slower metabolic rates than smaller animals.
Not always, but sometimes. She stole some. I hope she enjoyed it, Thindall. I hope she enjoyed it. But be safe there. Be safe. Here's all the cool scenes make you cool by Spencer. I know Thindall just appeared in Jern's stream as well. Tactics. Thindall is everywhere and nowhere, but also everywhere in the land of Sweden and the internet, chat.
So smaller animals create more DNA damaging byproducts, which means larger animals may get fewer mutations per cell. Now, of course, no one's out there putting blue whales in CAT scans, so it could be that some large animals actually do get cancer, but it just doesn't kill them, so we don't notice it.
Are peanuts even local to where elephants live? I'm not sure, Smikes. Gut says no. Gut says no.
And this is where giant size could be a lifesaver. You can imagine that in an animal the size of a bus, a tumor needs to be pretty gigantic to actually impact the animal's health.
Right on, Smike.
But hungry cancer cells also compete viciously with each other for resources. So the larger that a tumor gets, smaller hypertumors may act as kind of parasites on the original tumor and starve it so that it can't grow large enough to be deadly. Cancer is probably as ancient as multicellular life.
Again, Smikes hitting the nail on the head. Smike said this earlier, chat. Smikes are absolute legends.
Win the game for Smike. Okay, I can't. I just don't people. I don't people.
Love your face, sir. Love your face.
I mean, as soon as an organism evolves to have multiple specialized cells working together for the good of the whole.
They die of other causes before they die of cancer would be my hypothesis. Or with these hypotumors, you're less likely to ever see it form. Like maybe if we extended the elephants or blue whales lifespan, like we've just doubled it, maybe you'd be more likely to see a cancer effect.
Mutate and try to outcompete all the rest, especially at the expense of killing the whole organism. So any animal that evolved to be giant also had to evolve stronger defenses against cancer, or else it probably didn't survive. Basically, if your species gets big and lives a long time, that means you figured out a way not to be a walking tumor. The paradox actually makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. But what scientists hope is that by studying how these giant animals don't die of cancer, maybe we can learn some new tricks for fighting cancer in our own species. Because part of the paradox may just be that cancer rates in humans are shockingly high. And this may have something to do with our modern diet and lifestyle. The scientists have found across the animal kingdom, cancer mortality is tightly linked to what an animal eats, with mammals that eat other mammals facing the highest rates of cancer death. Now, cancer isn't new in humans. A handful of ancient mummies have been diagnosed with tumors, but cancer rates in people are higher today than ever before. In modern industrialized nations, thanks to a combination of less physical activity and diets that are loaded with calories and sugar and salt,
which then have breakdown products that can be free radicals and influence the DNA organization and cause mutation.
Fat. Well, increased weight alone puts humans at risk of at least 13 types of cancer. And this lifestyle has spread around the world with pretty sad results.
The long-term data has been hard to get, Smikes, just because the experimentation has been done that long, but I agree, we should want to see additional data on that front. Chat, we would also want to see our amazing friendo who's in the his house. Guys, go check out the lovely and amazing Gracie Cat as well. Love you, face Gracie Cat!
Within a couple of decades of switching to a Western-type diet, people living on Pacific and Indian Ocean islands experienced a massive surge in so-called diseases of civilization, like diabetes and cancer. Another major factor is how much pollution and cancer-causing chemicals we've put into the environment around us. These environmental carcinogens play a role in the
to know that you deserve it, Juno. You a star over here.
Oh,
reverse the card like Uno.
You're
breathtaking.
Love you, Grace Cat. Decent amount of fat is from like Brazil nuts, peanuts, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds. I'm not sure. So evil. The unfortunate thing is a lot of research when you're trying to dose animals for like a concentration of something, it's usually, and you show that like the Splenda study that shows you that Splenda can give you cancer. The animal that they did it and they gave so much Splenda that it's to equal, you'd have to eat your weight in Splenda for like every day for a year before it'll give you cancer. And it's just it's all a balancing act. Everything at a certain concentration is toxic. Everything is, even water, as Mike's pointed out earlier.
75% of human cancers. Even whales are not immune from this one. The one place in the world where whales get as much cancer as humans is Canada's St. Lawrence River estuary, where agricultural and industrial pollutants have...
And Evil, this was your question, right, earlier? If there's any resilience from blue whales or other whales as a response to pollution, it seems like here in this estuary, there's so much pollution that the whales get at the same rate of cancer as humans do. So it is not... It seems like you can mutagenize them at a certain level to induce cancer happening there.
Have accumulated for decades. And of course, a few lifestyle habits that can lead to cancer are uniquely human. I mean, whales don't use tobacco products or drink alcohol that we know of. It's pretty clear there's not one single answer to Peto's paradox. As usual, evolution has come up with many answers to the cancer problem in large and long-living animals. Life, as they say, finds a way. Humans, well, we can't accelerate our own evolution to become naturally cancer-free. But we do have one unique advantage. We can study evolution's answers and figure out new ways to treat the cancers that we do get. It wouldn't hurt to eat a little better, too, I guess. Maybe krill is the next cancer-fighting superfood. Stay curious. And just one more thing, I know it.
Thank you to everyone. You used to work for an environmental company. I put the big quotes because they're owned by big oil and companies, so you know corruption and such. Always look at the funder. Evil Petty. One cool, fascinating thing that I've seen in papers is there will be a component of the study that said if there's anything that you'd like to declare as a potential conflict of interest. And it's interesting, sometimes you'll see that the researcher is part of like they have a patent on it, or things like that. So there's definitely things to keep paying attention to it. A serious question: would you say that measurable portion of cancer-related deaths is because we've actually gotten so healthy and long-lived that we end up with it because something has to kill us in the end? So Thindal, the reason cancer happens and kills you isn't because the reason I think it's become more prevalent is because you're longer lived, and because you're longer lived, you're more likely to build up and accumulate mutations that can lead to cancer. So I've heard, Thindal, the hypothesis that eventually you will get cancer. Like, if you eventually, at a certain point, you will eventually hit it because you'll accumulate enough mutations in tumor suppressing genes such as P53 that you will end up getting cancer. And it's not necessarily that something has to kill you in the end. That's just a lifetime of accumulating mutations and having free radicals hit your genome will end up just causing that effect, if that makes sense. So that's why the hypothesis is that eventually everyone will get from it. Nothing else happens, basically cancer, dementia, or total organ failure because old. The dementia doesn't have to be from old. There's genetic predispositions to that, and again, mutations can lead to that buildup that cause like plaques within the neurons and a lot of other factors. So you have to be careful. And organ failure too is a function of cell division, and things stop as things divide more as your age. Your machinery to prevent mutation in those dividing cells get worse. And because of that, you're more likely to have something bad happen and have organ failure. So it's a lot of it is mutation during the cell division process. And you can't keep things young and fresh as well as you could when you're young, and so that's when you end up going down. I'm saying we're affected by not healthy way of living could be part of that. Yep, it definitely is part of it, Thindal. This video is pointing that out as well. 90% of its pollutants been in the 80s were poisoning. Now it's PFAS, microplastics. They're still lead. Actually, Smikes is right. My sister just she got a fellowship in Pittsburgh and then got one in at Penn. And the Pittsburgh rental that she's getting for that month even has like a big paragraph on the rental agreement about there being lead in all the walls, and that's like still a big thing. So just, paying attention to those factors is very important. Yeah. All right, chat. So we didn't really get into Elephant Bio 101 today, which is what I was more thinking about. That would be kind of the direction I was going in for our deep dive, but I hope y'all enjoyed us chatting about the similarity, like why an elephant is unique and how it can, be more resistant to cancer than humans, and what the genetic foundation of that was. I hope